charging it.
I like it.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this joint meeting of the Impact Advisory Committees. We are gathered here this evening to hopefully make some progress on implementing Elmore County impact fees by the cities of Mountain Home and Glen Ferry. Jeff and I have been working closely on this and in coordinating on this meeting. We certainly attempted to be prepared for some of the questions we anticipate from the committee. And we do have an agenda that we'll tentatively follow. But yeah, Jeff, what else do you want to say?
So, I'm Jeff Schroeder, the city attorney for the city of Mountain Home, or P&Z city attorney for Mountain Home, and then city attorney for the city of Ferry. What we have been asked by our governing bodies, is to have the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committees of each of the cities evaluate the CIP with respect to EMS and jail and whether we're going to implement it or not. And so that triggered some statutory duties that Development Impact Fee Advisory Committees have. And so what we wanted to do, there's I think one clear set of guidance that all the Impact Fee Advisory Committees got from their governing bodies in Mountain Home and Glen Ferry to make sure that the fees that are collected in the jurisdictions are spent there. And your job, your task, is to file a written report on this CIP, either with some adjustments or as is, or however you want to do it. So the first thing I want to do is to say thank you to the people who have volunteered to serve on these committees. This is not a topic that anybody likes or enjoys. It is one of the least known. It is one of the most complicated and difficult ones. It has built-in impediments when this statute was enacted, and so it's difficult to navigate. It's difficult for experienced attorneys to navigate. And so we're here to try to help you with the statutory framework in which you can operate, but there are policy decisions that are yours. We have the folks here that can answer the questions as to how this CIP was put together and its methodology, so that you can then deliberate amongst yourselves about what you want to file as a written report. So that's kind of, so maybe what we should do is just go around the table for the Impact Fee Advisory Committees and introduce yourselves and how you got here, how much you love.
John Christwell on the County Advisory Committee.
Kurt Maester, County Advisory Committee.
Mary Walsh is online.
Oh, okay.
Mary's online.
Ann Westcott, I am the impact fee consultant for the cities in the county.
May I ask a question? Who are you with?
I am no longer with anyone because I sold the company, but I am the brain trust, so I'm here tonight.
You were with Galena?
I am Galena.
Oh, you are
Galena.
Galena. Okay,
Yes.
all right, that's what I want to know.
Yes.
Mitra Mehta, Cooper Land Use and Building Director.
Helen Roberts, Emergency Services Director for Elmore County.
Brenda Chapin, City Clerk in Glen Ferry.
Rebecca Negretti, Valley Clerk, City.
Johnny Hernandez, Building Official.
James Rodden, Admin Manager for Elmore County Land Use.
Guy in the hat.
Mike Hollinshed, Elmore County Sheriff.
Kyle Moore, Elmore County Sheriff's Office.
Random spectator.
Yeah, random spectator.
Christy Accord, Elmore County Rural Development.
Okay, then back to you. Oh, wait, let's go back.
Greg Berry. Ozzy Grubentrog, I'm with Ann.
Taryn Mitchell, both the county and the city of Mountain Home's impact fee.
Ray Lurig, City of Mountain Home.
Jennifer Baker, Glen Ferry, P&Z.
Denver Price, Glen Ferry, P&Z.
Brandon McCarthy, City of Mountain Home impact fee.
Brenda Ellis, City Mountain Home Planner.
Philip Mills, impact fee.
Mountain Home.
Nicole Coffey, City Planner.
This guy.
Dylan Special.
housekeeping we need to get out of the way. One is each of the committees should establish a quorum or call roll, and then Mountain Home City Committee needs to elect a chairman. So if we can get that done.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So I think it might be muted.
Can you hear us?
I cannot. Well, I can now. I didn't hear anything. I was like,
You're doing fine.
oh, that's a really quiet room.
We just went through and did introductions, and we did note that you were on the phone, Mary.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, so we'll let the committees form and call roll and establish quorums or lack thereof. And then Mountain Home can elect a chair. So we'll sit back while we do that.
I'd like to make a recommendation to have Brandon be the chair.
Second.
Mountain Home City.
Second.
We'd also like to establish a quorum.
Sorry.
We have 4 of our members
Impact.
present. Excuse me, I'm so used to the planning and zoning. The Impact Fee Advisory Board committee is present, so.
So it's been
Motion and a second?
seconded, I guess, all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion that we nominate Philip as vice chair.
Oh, great.
Second.
All those in favor?
Nay.
Aye.
Unanimous.
You lost Philip.
So we only have 2 of the remaining 4 Glens Ferry members. So Glens Ferry's Impact Fee Advisory Committee doesn't have a quorum. They can still participate in the discussion, but they won't be able to render any decision.
Mr. Schroeder, do we need to recognize the Elmore County?
Yes.
The Elmore County Advisory Committee, John Cristobal, we have a quorum with Mary on the phone. So I need a second. Go with that, or motion, please.
Motion, we second that.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next thing I had in here, and you're gonna, everybody should have a little handouty thing. You turn to the first thing is the process to implement development impact fees. There's one page and another one called the guiding statute. Just so everyone's on the same page, I think a bunch of you have heard this a million times, but I'm just going to do it one more time. So we found out partway through this process that we couldn't do it the easy way because there's a statutory and constitutional bar to county ordinances applying to the city and vice versa. So the cities have to adopt this ordinance and they have to adopt the CIP in order to be able to do it. And so the steps we laid out, which we've done at a couple of governing body meetings, we're at step 1. The City Development Impact Fee Advisory Committees meet and they review the CIPs. And I included in there the statutory role of a Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee. So it's crystal clear what your authority is and what role you play in this. The role you play is to file a written report with the governing body so that the governing body can decide whether they're going to implement or adopt this CIP or not. So that's the role. So your report, after reviewing this, goes to the governing body to decide whether to hold a public hearing and then ultimately adopt the CIP. Once that happens, then the real work begins between the city and the county in terms of drafting up the intergovernmental agreement. In the case of Glens Ferry, the whole impact fee ordinance. In the case of Mountain Home, amending the impact fee ordinance. And then amending the comp plans to add this CIP or its modification or its custom version for each city to their relative comp plans. So a lot of the mechanics and maybe some of the questions that you might have about how this is going to work and how it's going to apply another day, a broader, more wholesale revamp of this, the rest of this CIP, for the purposes of tonight. So, now I can stop babbling, and are there any governing body members who want to make any comments? There aren't any council people here. We got one mayor, one sheriff. He doesn't want to say anything. You don't, or do you? Who wants? Do you want to say anything? Okay.
I'll say something real quick.
Okay.
I think, like, on behalf of me, Mayor Sykes, or the city, like, EMS fees or whatnot, that is something I think is, as we looked into it, is something that's doable. However you guys want to articulate that, I think that's why we're all here, to try to make sure that the EMS fees get really looked at. But then I think we definitely want to make sure that if they're collected in Mountain Home, they stay in Mountain Home. So that's my just 2 cents. Other than that, you guys do good work, and I'll shut up.
And to be clear on that, Mayor, is that if they're collected from development inside the city, not actually collected by the city, but over at the county.
Correct.
So there would be a voucher, like we
Yes.
talked about previously.
So in our perfect mindset, it would go to the county, they pay their fee, and then they come over with a receipt showing our building official, like, hey, or you, or Brenda, or Nicole, we paid, now do the rest of the building permits.
So the city would issue their building permit with that verification.
So, anyone? No one else? No other? We don't have any commissioners. We don't have any council members. So, that brings us to item 4. And this is the one, this is why the food's here, why you have pens and pencils, paper, giant copies of the CIP, sticky notes with letters on them, and so forth. Are there any questions from Abby or I? Yes, sir.
Schroeder, how many of these intergovernmental agreements do we have in the state of Idaho? How many of these exist?
So, I have personally worked on shepherding through one Parma. This is between a city and a fire district. Fire districts don't have ordinance authority, so they have to come to the city to get an ordinance drafted. So we did one in Crouch. So Bill Gigray does these all over the place. There's one pending in Greenleaf. There's one that exists in Crouch that's operative right now. Parma is complicated because it has multiple counties. But in terms of a county and a city one, I think this is the only one.
And the county has already executed intergovernmental agreements with the fire districts as well. So King Hill Rural Fire District as well as Mountain Home Rural Fire District. We initiated those and executed those almost immediately after the county impact fees were implemented. We were going to do the same thing with Mountain Home and Ferry, as Jeff mentioned, and then that's when we realized that the cities themselves should really be adopting the ordinance that incorporates the sections of the CIP that are applicable.
So to be clear, there is 0 cities collecting impact fees on behalf of counties at this time in the state.
I don't know that to be true. I have heard tell, talk around the campfire, is this might be the first, but I don't know that. I know that, oh, go ahead. Yeah, she would know. No, Maria, she would know.
offset the fees that we collect?
No.
Okay.
The reason why is why I bought dinner. So we would have,
Okay.
had we just jumped in and done it without doing it. So we've come through this statute and case law.
Okay.
I have a whole memo on why we have to do it this way.
Okay.
Doing it this way and making sure that we do it this way and making sure that this committee follows its statutory goal in writing a recommendation to the governing body before they do it protects my client, which is the city of Mountain Home, protects my other client, the city of Glenns Ferry, if we adopt these, from them being challenged. If we follow the procedure by the book that they wrote for us, that they deliberately put in place to be difficult, to protect the fee payer and to protect the city, then we are not. That's if this was subjecting us to potential litigation because we're doing something hinky or crazy or new or whatever, we wouldn't be sitting here. You wouldn't have that delicious sandwich.
And I think as way of a little more background as well, the reason there's such a push to at least get the EMS fees implemented is because when, going back to your question about agreements between cities and counties, if there is not a mechanism to pay for the services that the county is providing for the city, that has to be done in one form or the other. Whether or not it's by collecting and implementing impact fees, great. That way, you know, growth is paying for growth in a sense versus it getting spread across the whole tax base. The other option is just an intergovernmental agreement to pay for those services between the county and the city to ensure that the county is not facing a deficit on the increase of growth within that area that they're just basically having to eat the cost for.
So how do we determine, okay, so you have fees and we have fees, so we have EMS fees in the city, or we have police fees as well. So I heard that as part of the EMS, right?
So that's a really good point, and that's something that Alan Roberts will touch on tonight, because I think there is maybe a misconception about what is funding what. And that is really what's driving this conversation of there isn't funding coming from the city for EMS. And that's why we need to get that implemented, is to pay for that, because, and I'm gonna spoil Alan's key points, but a majority of the growth, a majority of the service calls are coming from the city of Mountain Home. And there's no funding coming from the city to help pay for that EMS.
And when you say EMS, because I look at police as part of EMS, because that's an emergency
I know,
response.
yeah.
So to clarify, we're only talking about fire, or are we talking about fire and rescue? Are we talking about ambulance services?
Ambulance services, and I'm not going to steal any more from Alan, but yeah, he will describe that, and they really are so separate, and that's why we've kind of put on hold other discussions about the jail and the sheriff impact fees. We really just want to focus on EMS.
I'm going to steal one of Ann's talking points that I've heard since I first heard Ann talk 18 years ago with Ferry.
Was I pretty then?
What's that?
Was I pretty back then?
Don't answer that.
You can't say, you can't answer that, I heard that.
Now I'm an attorney. Don't, please try to keep in mind, at the front of your mind, that the only task that we're looking at are capital improvements that are necessary to support growth. They are not for ongoing revenue to fund those services. It doesn't pay for people, it doesn't pay for gas, it doesn't pay for tires. It pays for a building, it pays for an ambulance. It's for capital improvements. And not capital improvements that you should have bought a year ago. They're capital improvements that you're going to need because all these people just showed up.
Because of growth.
So just be sure that's like right in front of you. So when we talk about fees for services, there's fees for coming into the ambulance hauling me away because it fell down 2 years ago, and then there's fees for building a place, buying the ambulance and building a place to put the two wild. So
It's for land acquisition.
yeah, land.
And one more minute, but
Gentlemen?
sure enough. Okay,
You're late for dinner.
I get you. Sure.
earmarking those fees. So, oh, a Mountain Home fee payer, that goes into the Mountain Home bucket. Glens Ferry fee payer, that goes into the Glens Ferry bucket.
And those will all have their own separate general ledger, items that they'll go into.
And there will be annual meetings where the accounting of that will be shared, like we had one in June of last year where we shared it with our advisory committee, how much money we have taken in for sheriff patrol, sheriff jail, and EMS, and who paid for that is kept in a detail, that James mentioned.
So the other thing to note,
It's in
your second,
everybody's interest to keep that straight. I mean, everybody, there isn't anybody who benefits from trying to prevaricate on that information, or, I mean.
so that they statutorily have to provide a report. They have to keep the accounting, and then if it is, and then if the 8-year clock runs out, everybody gets a refund. So, but here's, the other thing is, don't forget that that your thankless task as Impact Fee Advisory Committee members is an ongoing commitment. And in fact, if you look at the sheet that I gave you about guiding statute,
I hadn't realized that.
it's your roles. So there's land use assumptions that need to be monitored. You need to make sure that those are correct, that where the land is being used and being developed. The next one is file written comments. That's tonight's task, why I underline and bold it. But you monitor and evaluate the implementation of the CAP. That's you guys do this. You file periodic reports at least annually with respect to the CIP and report to the governmental entity any perceived inequities in implementing it. So you have an ongoing ability to, during your periodic meetings, come back and go, oh, this isn't happening the way that we thought it was. And you can change this more frequently than once a year. And then advise the governmental entity on the need to update or revise it. So you're the team. You're some of the team. And then the intergovernmental agreement that we write will mandate how that comes about. I would really like to stop that one. Can you guys take over?
Sure.
Or are there any more questions, I guess? Yes, sir.
I think that, well, I'm not going to speak for everybody, I'll speak for myself. So there was a scatter shot of instruction provided to the committees when they were formed about the purpose, about what our authority was, what information we're entitled to, and really what the purpose was. I'm not super thrilled, I would say, and the information was plentiful, but the instruction was not. And certainly, there was mention of the Title 67, Chapter 82, not that I've committed to memory, but there's a lot of teeth for the committees that was, I would say, is largely unknown. We're entitled to have information that deal with virtually everything within the county, including land use decisions, so that if someone says or elicits our name, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee has said this is okay, that we are in fact okay with what is being said or the money's collected. So I hope not to do a lot of talking tonight and rather listen to what's being shared. I think I've got a pretty healthy amount of information, as you can tell I've got it already, to compare and contrast to see if there's inconsistencies with the information provided. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm saying whether or not the information is consistent that's been shared with us as members of the committees, and then what is being asked. So reason why I piped up, Mr. Schroeder, is that there was some question about, well, the question is, we didn't even know that this was an ongoing thing. We thought maybe it was a one and done.
We were told we were coming to this one meeting, and we weren't told anything about this is ongoing. No.
Well, then
I mean, not unwilling to do it, but this really looks like I'm in over my head. I don't know that I'm knowledgeable enough in this stuff to belong here. This kind of sounds like a much bigger deal than
I think what might be helpful is Ann is going to provide a bit of an overview, and I think obviously Jeff can speak to the commitment of being on the committee.
I'm trying not to panic.
We're gonna
Just,
step back
you
and
know.
give kind of a 101 overview of the impact fees, and then we'll dig into the specific questions.
So I have a question, real quick.
Well, I want to get back to Jennifer's concern. So the main commitment, the minimum commitment is once a year. And so this is your first dipping your toe in the pool. If you don't want to, you can dip out. But the main thing was to get a committee here because the questions that you and Denver asked at both the county presentation indicate that you are well equipped to address this. So you shouldn't be too panicked about it, I don't think. It's not like you're going to have to meet weekly, but the point I'm trying to make is if you as an Impact Fee Advisory Committee member see perceived inequities in the plan, and you have the ability to raise that issue and say, hey, let's have a meeting, and let's advise the governing body on it. So the main thing they need is just you folks, particularly with your very pointed and very, very astute questions that you were asking when the mayor was bringing this up to you guys, to just put those skills to bear in evaluating the CIP and taking the information they provide you and then giving advice.
So there are two parts of the presentation. I think Anne will talk about the overall impact fee and the methodology, and then the second part of this is what I think you all are interested in seeing, which is how are we doing in terms of execution of those impact fees on day-to-day basis, what are the growth numbers, and that's where James and I have some information for you. So why don't we kick it off to Anne, who can talk about overall what impact fees are and how the methodology was developed.
I'd like to finish my question with Mr. Schwer real quick. So you had mentioned a few minutes ago that you end up getting a refund if the funds aren't spent within 8 years, correct? But yet we have on page 8 under capital improvement a 10-year growth listed there. So that's a little bit of inconsistency for me because we're seeing, it says over the next 10 years, yet we're talking about 8 years. So
You get 8, but you can get an extension for 2. 3 years.
Okay.
I thought it was 3 years.
Yeah. There we go.
It is weird and stupid that they gave us two numbers, 8 and 10. But what I think about is that it's first in, first out. So if you paid your fee today, they need to spend your money within 8 years. If I don't pay my fee until 4 years from now, the clock for me starts 8. So it's one of the things that the DPAC really does want to make sure that, the county says each year, we call them at risk. So every year we do a report that would say, this amount is reaching the 8-year amount. We should probably buy a defibrillator off this list in order to make sure that we're using that money.
And a defibrillator would be considered a capital improvement?
If it's on the CIP, if it's already on the CIP, then yes. I have never had a client who let their money sit there for 8 years. That's just dumb. But the law just makes sure that we're not taking people's money and wasting it by just earning interest on it.
Sure, just since we're on that topic of timelines, I just want to ask for clarification, maybe with your expertise on that. Is Idaho code give exception for wastewater? I think it's 20 years on that is what I saw in Idaho code.
Utility plans are in a different section than impact fees, and yes, utilities usually plan on a 20-year basis.
Okay, I just
but
wanted
it's a
to
different
ask.
collection model. All right. I've been blissfully out of this business for a little while, so I've refocused on it. I've done Mountain Homes fees, I've been involved in Elmore County and Glens Ferry. I just turned it over to Ozzy sort of halfway in the middle. So, since some of you may be newer to this process, let me just do a little bit of Impact Fee 101. Impact fees really shouldn't be difficult to understand because you all either are payers or beneficiaries of the Impact Fee program. It needs to make sense to you. It should not be so complex that you don't understand it. lot of jurisdictions just sort of waited until they had enough money and then bought the next thing. And that's not the very best way to run, right? So I know that, by Idaho requiring impact fees to be based on a capital improvement plan, it means that everyone who has impact fees has already determined a very sound and statutorily required methodology for what they need to build or buy in order to support growth. The last benefit is that in addition to property taxes, in the olden days, the way infrastructure was paid for was through what are called exactions, which in order for me to give you this building permit, I'm going to make you dedicate this plot of land for a park, or I'm going to make you buy an ambulance, or whatever. And that's a way to do it, except it overly burdens one developer than another. It's somewhat arbitrary, it's not really fair. And so there is some peace of mind in having a methodology that is applied equitably to everyone. This is all you need to know to be an expert in impact fees, these next four things. Impact fees are a one-time payment only for growth-related infrastructure, and it's collected at the time that the building permit is pulled. Can't be used for O&M, can't be used for operations and maintenance, like Jeff said. It can't be used to fix things that you should have bought before, so those are called deferred maintenance. And very importantly, it has to be proportional to the amount of demand that growth is putting on the system. So I can't just say, oh, there's 100 houses, we need a new school. We don't need a school for 100 houses. We need to be able to go back and figure out how many new kids need to be there before a school is actually necessitated, and what amount of those are new houses versus existing houses, etc. That methodology is very clear in the statute, and we've been using this methodology unchallenged for 20 years to meet that expectation. And it's also designed to ensure that the current level of service does not degrade. So if you have one officer per 1,000 people in the city of Mountain Home, and you're going to have 1,000 more people come into your community in 5 years, you need one more officer, right? And that officer will need a cubicle and a police car. And so that cubicle and police car is what gets put into that growth-related capital improvement plan. So that was the really basic part, and now I can walk you through just the EMS portion of this very big report. I like the EMS one because it's very linear, and Alan is so charming that he'll be able to bail me out if I don't know things. So in your big report, if you go to page 29, remember that the things that we're responsible for connecting are the amount of new growth. Then I have to be able to figure out how much infrastructure that new growth is going to demand. Then I need to figure out how much that new growth will cost. I go back and divide it by the number of people coming, and that's the impact fee. It's unfortunately actually very simplistic when it comes down to it. So on page 29, you will see we start with the growth. We want to know, oh, that's not page 29. Start with the growth. We want to say, okay, how fast is Elmore County, Mountain Home, Glens Ferry, how fast are those communities expected to grow? Now, I'm not Karnak for any of those of you who are old enough to know who Johnny Carson is. I see maybe 3 of us in this room who probably know that. I'm not looking at you for any specific reason. But we certainly do have a lot of economic methodology to figure out, do the same kind of projections that they do around the state, around the country. And when we do growth projections, we use a variety of comp plan projections. The counties, the cities have their comp plans. We have a lot of national data. We have data that comes from the builders, home builders, and title companies, etc., that we base that on.
So may I ask you a question real quick then? So you're basing impact fees, I was a part of the impact fee when you were on it, for the city. So it's my understanding that we based our fees at 3% at that time. That was roughly the expected rate of growth for Mountain Home City. What is the actual rate of growth for Mountain Home City right now?
You again called me out of hibernation, so I do not have that in my mind. Okay. But we could, I'm sure maybe someone in Mountain Home knows the answer, maybe in right here on page 29.
Is that the actual or is that the projected? Because it says.
Well, you start on
projected.
actual, right? So you can see my base year of 2021. The way I get to a base year is not only do I take, this is what the census or all of the, building departments are telling me, this is how many units there are now. I go back 10 years and take actual building permit data to know what the rate was. Then I extrapolate that going forward, unless I know that something like Mayfield is on board, and then we might count Mayfield, but as part of this process, we took that out, so it's sort of it's on its own kind of thing. So what you have in front of you of 29 is a rate that was based on the continuation of a 10-year average growth rate. Over the last 10 years, that's been a high up and a low down, so kind of averages out there. So you can see at 35%, and so it's running at about 3.4% of our projections. The thing to remember about growth projections in this process, because we don't have a crystal ball, is that if you grow faster than we projected, people will pay their impact fees faster, but they will also need their infrastructure faster. So you will just grow both things at the same time, and then you'll add projects on to the end of the list. If you stop growing for 3 years, you won't be collecting any money. You get to keep it for that 8 years. So you're also going to not need another station. You're going to wait and do a reset. And that again is why the defects are so important, is that if you went 4 years and still hadn't pulled, another permit, probably time to stop your impact fee program or reevaluate what kind of apocalypse might be, in front of the building industry. But that's why we set what we feel is a conservative yet reasonable amount of growth. We don't want to over or under project, and then we allow those to follow real life and adjust as necessary.
So one of the thoughts that our advisory committee shared with us when we had our first annual meeting, and all of you were there, 4 of you were there, was exactly this, because we have 2 holes right now within the city of Mountain Home and Glens Ferry. In Elmore County's growth numbers, which James has, and we have shared it with our advisory committee, our advisory committee felt very strongly that we really need to start working with the city of Mountain Home and city of Glens Ferry, not having those holes, so that our growth trajectory is that is assumed by Ann and all is actually keeping up. Otherwise, if we have 2 holes in our entire Elmore County, that's not going to show us the growth trajectory. The second discussion that took place, which Ozzy did a wonderful job in that meeting, is helping everybody understand that 1 year is too soon to make that judgment call, that we are growing fast enough or not fast enough. We need to allow for multiple years to go by before we say, oh yeah, we are not growing fast enough, or yes, we are going faster, before we start making adjustments in our capital improvements plan, because otherwise you'll constantly be adjusting your capital improvements plan, costing us a lot of money in just consultants' fees. So this is an important piece to remember. Please, go ahead.
And an excellent point. Again, that's one of the pins for DFAC is to watch the growth rate, to watch what's happening in your city and your county in terms of service level needs, to watch the dollar amounts. You're going to watch it all the time. You are the oversight body.
Okay, that's what I wanted you to clarify a little bit more. So we adopt these fees, and then it's our job to oversee basically the amount that the fees are being assessed to a builder or whoever for a particular project. Whose job is it to make sure that those numbers that were being bid to start paying for the project when the money comes in, who's in charge of making sure that it's being spent correctly? And then also right behind that, it seems like you've probably got a pretty good suite of custom design software that you run these numbers through to keep track of, that first in, first out money and what it's kind of being tagged for.
Yeah, it's a full accounting system.
So, yeah, but so is the city of Glens Ferry gonna have to develop their own spreadsheets or whatever to keep track of that, and who's?
Literally any city in the state of Idaho can track impact fees much more simply than they can track their property taxes.
Okay,
So
all right.
it's a relatively easy system
Okay.
That is audited every year. It's part of the city or the county's financial statements. They track the impact fund as its own fund.
Right.
And all of the things you asked about is what does the numbers change? I'll get into in just a minute about how we track these numbers and these assumptions. But it's very easy to track where the money has been paid, what parcel it was for, where that money needs to stay in terms of what we're building or buying.
That was kind of the other part of that was, is it gonna be like our job to look at those, the expenditures also when they do get to spending money out of the fund? Are we the ones that are responsible for signing off on?
It's not quite as horrific as you're making it sound.
Okay. Just,
Yes, if I were you, I'd be like, no, thank you, I'm going. So every year you would get a report that said this is how much money we took in, and this is what we plan to spend next year. We want budget approval to go, and you would say, yes, you have enough money for that next ambulance, and so yes, go buy that next ambulance with that impact fees. It's going to have to wait. An ambulance is $250,000, so you're just going to be amassing money for a while. There's not going to be a whole lot for you to be looking at.
Right.
What you're going to be asked is, are they asking to spend the money on something that's in the capital improvement plan? That's a very easy check.
Yeah.
Do they have money in the fund? You will be given the financial statements, so you will know that. And that's all you're at. I mean, those are the two questions and the information that you get.
So we're not being asked to make any value decisions on it, just empirical evidence.
The attorney is responsible for writing the consultants.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Acceptability of their
Cool.
Yes.
All right.
And if I could interject really quickly. So Philip, to answer your question directly, so I've been tracking the growth rates. So I think for the county side, we started our discussions in, I can't remember if it was 2021 or 2022. So we now have working on 3 years of growth rate data. And so just so happens I have a printout of that, and I'd like to be prepared. So Mountain Home currently is sitting at 1.3% growth rate. CUNA, for instance, is 4.23%. Cities like Meridian, Nampa, and Caldwell are all growing over 3%, but they're roughly 3.7, 3.8%. And Star is actually close to 10%. So, the growth rates I do think is important. It's one thing that I believe we should be keeping tabs on. We should be as committees. I know for the city of Mountain Home, we believe and have motioned and agreed that we should meet more than once a year. I think that would be, I would like to do the same for the county and find out if the growth rates that we are proposed or projected really fall in line with what's reality. So,
So Terry, let me pause you real quick. While we were sitting here, I pulled up Elmore County and I pulled up Oklahoma City. And it's looking more like 1.31 and 1.12 for the county for growth rates.
1.12.
And so our impact fees, if I remember right, for the city, we were basing that off of a little over 3% growth.
4.1%. So I have a memo from 2023. 4.1% was the projected growth rate for Mountain Home. And it was, I want to say it was 3% for the county, countywide. It was either 3 or 3.5. So the CIPs, and I think we'll listen to that, the CIPs are based on those growth rates, projected growth rates. We're sitting at 1/3 those projected growth rates. We have waited more than a year. We've waited several years or multiple years. And so that's why I do believe and really appreciate this meeting, that we discuss it as bodies are looking at empirical evidence, empirical data of what the CIPs are based on.
All right, I appreciate it.
To add a little bit more context to that, while I understand it's, you can be drawn to these more complicated pieces of data sets, what you'll see when we get to the end of this conversation is that what I do is create a relationship between a new house and its proportional share of whatever type of infrastructure. So it doesn't matter if you grow at 1, 3, or 15%. What I am ensuring is that that one house is never paying more than its proportional share. And the way I can pin that in time is that at the point of doing the study, I have to show how much infrastructure exists for the existing number of houses. So if you have only one officer per 1,000 at that time, and therefore only 100,000 square feet of police infrastructure, I don't care how fast or slow you grow going forward, every new house can only pay its proportional share of that one new officer. So by tying it to its relationship of what a new house does in terms of infrastructure, and not making that be any more than what people have already paid before, you can grow faster or slower. The growth projections are really meant for us to have a starting point of imagining if this is what the growth is, ish, one way or the other, we're going to need another station. Particularly because it's not just the amount of growth, it's where it is. You want an ambulance to be within 6 to 8 minutes of your house, or you will die. So it doesn't matter if 100 houses are right there next to you. If the station is over there, so it's not just the number of houses, it's how we provide service. So we'll get into that when we get into the CIP. Are we comfortable with the growth part for a minute? Have you fallen asleep yet? You people, I know, I have to watch you particularly. I remember you. You just always have the same facial expression, and I never know what you're thinking.
He's a poker player.
He is a poker player. Okay. All right. So for this conversation, based on that growth rate, with all the caveats that we've talked about, in Elmore County, including the 2 cities, so unincorporated and incorporated, the estimate for the next 10 years was about 15,000 new residents, which would make about 7,200 new homes, and that's a 50% increase over 10 years. So about, on average, a 5% increase a year. The number of non-residential is usually driven off of residential, obviously. Retail comes after rooftops. So we know how many new jobs that would develop. We know how many new million square feet. It's about 1.34 square feet for non-residential development. That could be retail, office, industrial, or institutional. So, it could be like a Chobani that's in Twin Falls County. It could be just someone's insurance office. It could be a variety of different things. It's broken out. Residential is broken out by single family and multifamily because those are different sizes and obviously have an assumed a different number of people in them. Non-residential is broken out by class, retail, office, industrial, and institutional, because each of those uses has a larger dependence. There's more people going to a Starbucks than going to the insurance office, for example.
So is a multifamily, it shows here on the page that multifamily is actually a lower percentage or lower fee for multifamily versus single family.
Right, because it's per unit. It's not per development. So every apartment has 1.3 people in it. Every single family residential has 2.7 in it. I mean, it depends on where you are. I would have picked whatever was relevant to here. So if there are fewer people multifamily. For the whole apartment building, it would be far more, because they'd be paying by door.
Gotcha.
Yes. So, given that those are the growth projections that we confidently feel are based on the best set of metrics that can be provided at this time, knowing that there are many ways for you to adjust as those things change, if you feel that it makes a marked difference, go to page 15. And so remember how I told you that we can't just make up a list of things we want to build or buy and then make new growth pay for it. I have to figure out what the current level of service is right now. So currently in the county, including the cities, because remember EMS, now and again, we're just going to speak for you. EMS in Elmore County is not part of the fire or police departments. Weird, but true. Sorry, you're weird. It's just the answer. They work all together, and yes, everyone would think they were the public, the emergency respondents, but if you need an ambulance, it's not the police or the fire department that is responding to that call. Fire engine might show up, but it's not who's doing the service. And if you need the jaws of life, it's actually the EMS district that owns the jaws of life, and so if you need to be extricated, the fire department will show up, but so will EMS.
So rescue is considered part of EMS then?
Yes.
Is that right, Al?
Yes.
So let's think about you all living here in Elmore County, and we know that right now there's a main station, a Glens Ferry station, and a Pine station. That's how much square footage the EMS district has to serve all of you. And if I take that amount of square footage and I divide it by the number of residential units and non-residential square feet that's already here, I can identify that there is 0.36 square feet per person of EMS space and 0.12 cents or 12 cents per person, sorry, 12 square, I'm so tired, 0.12 square feet per non-residential square foot. That's just the relationship between the amount of built environment right now and how much space he's got to run out of. It could be a pathetic amount of space, but it is the correlation, and impact fees can only continue that relationship. You're not pathetic, Al. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. So, what I have to do then is take that 0.36 and 0.12. Yes, Jennifer?
So where do we get the information about what, this number without some context doesn't mean anything? Is this an awful small amount of space compared to what we should be?
It doesn't matter, because impact fees aren't here to help you have a better level of service. They can only have growth paid to continue whatever level of service you have. So if my pathetic remark probably was not helpful. If your community thinks that EMS is under infrastructure, that's something for all the property taxpayers to talk about. It's not for growth to solve.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So I now have a relationship between how much built off, how much station space I need per person. In figure 10 on page 16, you'll see for that many people, I also need 2 quick response units, 2 heavy rescue units, and 4 ambulances. And so then I know I need 0.23 of an apparatus per every 1,000 people. Same thing, I go down to EMS equipment in figure 11. That's all the stuff that goes on an ambulance. And I just know that the number of equipment per 1,000 people is etc. That's why I'm not in this business anymore, because these become so boring. So what this is telling me on 15 and 16 is it takes this much station space, this much ambulances, and this much equipment to serve the existing public. Then I move on to page 22, which is if I know know what the relationship is between a person and a station, apparatus, and equipment, and I know how many new people are coming, then I know how much more station space, how many new apparatus, and how much equipment I need to buy to make sure that all of that growth doesn't make it. Then the level of service is not only just the relationship between people and stations, but it's basically, it's how fast they can get to you. So if we grew and grew and grew and never bought another ambulance, would they still get to you in 8 minutes? They couldn't possibly. So we just want to make sure that there's enough ambulances to keep responding whatever average amount of minutes they're responding now. So on page 22, we say,
Already found.
on page 22, we say, I know how many new people are coming, or I'm estimating how many new people are coming, and I know how much station space, ambulance, and equipment I need to accommodate those people, and that is figure 18. So figure 18 says, if I know that I have point X number of square feet per person of station space, then I'm going to take that metric and I'm going to multiply it by the number of new people, and I know I'm going to need 6,000 square feet of station space. Now, this again is a long-range look at how much station space they would need to serve the county, and it's not just a one-per-one, it's also where's the growth going to be. So obviously most of the growth in the next 10 years will be in Mountain Home City, so that Mountain Home West Station is there.
Is that really true that it's the most of the growth is in Mountain Home City? Because I'm looking here, you actually have Mayfield in your statistics.
I was just going to say, take Mayfield out of this conversation, which we argued about back and forth. Ozzy and I argued quite a lot about this. We did the study both ways, including Mayfield and having them pay their share, or not including it, having them pay their own fees, and it actually works out exactly the same. So for the sake of this conversation and the sake of not knowing how fast Mayfield will develop, we're just taking it off the table because as they develop, they will pay for their own station. We won't make anyone else pay for their station. They're going to be big enough to have their own station, so they either can pay for it or not.
So
We're
will
not
the
going to.
impact fees be different than the county's current impact fees?
No, and the reason is because for EMS is a mutually reinforcing system. So if I were in, let's say, a really big urban city, and there's 100 square miles of this city, and there's no way that this ambulance is ever going to respond to a growth over here, then I can create literal service areas which have different fees. But an ambulance is going to respond to any call within the county, wherever it is. So I'm not going to.
But your 8-minute goes out the window if you're expecting an ambulance from Mountain Home City limits to respond.
So when there's enough growth in Mayfield for them to
So
buy their
let me
ambulance,
chime-
they buy the ambulance and
So
build the station.
Let me chime in this discussion because I am talked about exemption from development also. On Mayfield Springs, there is a condition, and currently they are building the emergency response building, 7,500 square feet out of developer's cost, which was a condition of approval. The exemption piece that she talked about. In addition to that, to O&M that facility, they are going to be contributing $1,000, which is above and beyond the impact fees, towards O&M for sheriff, and $1,000 for O&M for EMS. They are going to allow the county to lease that facility at $1 annually. That agreement is signed, and so we will be able to use the 7,500 square feet facility for our, O&M purposes. So that is completely out of exemption, above and beyond the impact fee discussion.
This was calculated before that agreement went into place, and we used this to substantiate that agreement, and they actually negotiated higher than what so there's definitely more, there's going to be more capital in place to ensure that you'll not be pulling it away from the city. So for this case, I'm just doing math in a whole bucket. We can take Mayfield's growth and their costs off the table because those have been taken care of somewhere else. Still going to need that Mountain Home West station, and at some point a Glens Ferry station and a Pine station, just to be able to get that, appropriate do not die kind of response. So if we had all those new people in the county, no matter where they are, we would build 4 stations. We know we're going to take Mayfield out of this conversation because it's taking care of itself. That doesn't make the fee go down because I took Mayfield out. If I'm taking Mayfield's growth and its cost out, it's still the same math. It's still the same. So we identify those 4 stations. We say how much of that is because of residential growth, how much of it is non-residential growth. You can see 85% of it is because of houses, 15% is non-residential, and then I divide that by the number of people or trip, which is non-residential. So each person, and later on we're gonna convert people into number of houses, but each new person, their proportional share of a station is $153. Every new person that comes to Elmore County, whether in the cities or the county, pays $153. They're going to have built their part of the station that's necessary to keep that 8-minute response.
You say that per person. That's what you said, per person.
Yes, and in a minute you'll see that the impact fee for EMS is $153, and then I'll show you, plus ambulance, plus equipment, times the number of people in the house.
I'm assuming you're making projections based on your estimates of growth.
Right.
By saying that.
Right, remember I
You
said...
say per person. If I'm building a house for three people, I could still put 5 in it.
Right, and I can't control for that. No one can control for that.
I just want to make sure.
But I also can control, I also can say, and there are houses, along the river that are 10,000 square feet and 2 people live there. I can't control how many people actually live there. I can make generalized estimates on the average number of people I know by the census that live in a house in Elmore County is X. And that's what I use as the methodology. Okay, so we've used that same methodology on the next 2 pages. We did it for stations, now we're going to do it for apparatus. They're going to need 1 more apparatus, but that's going to be needed for Mayfield. So apparatus is not even a conversation we need to have.
What page are you on now?
On page 23.
Oh, that.
Ozzy, are you keeping me on track?
I don't have the sheets, but everything you're saying is correct, so.
Someone get him on the bottom. Hopefully. Okay, so it's the, then you can see on figure 20, planned EMS equipment, there are striker systems, Zoll monitors, etc., things that are needed in order to respond to the increased number of calls. I'm going to take off all the ones for Mayfield down below. So you see 4 striker systems, 4 Zoll monitors, 6 portable radios, etc. These are things that have to last at least 10 years, that is equipment that's necessary to serve that growth. And you go down to the bottom and you see that, so every person needs to pay $26. So when you move to the next page, page 25, you are going to see that $1.24 per person, 35 cents per non-residential vehicle trip, and in a minute, vehicle trips will be converted into non-residential square footage. So that is, and that's per person, so now I have to get you to one more spreadsheet here. Let me find it. Okay, I think it is on, it's on page 28. So on page 28, remember that the impact fee is a product of the total cost of infrastructure that you need to build or buy in order to keep this level of service consistent as you grow, divided by who's coming.
Oh, okay.
So when we do that math, and I add up the EMS stations, the vehicles and apparatus, the equipment, the cost per person is $193.
documents year 2.
year two.
This was the phase, I see, the
Yes.
phase in. Oh, yes, because there is in the ordinance an annual cost, an annual inflationary adjustment.
Okay.
This report was written 2 years ago. They put the, yes, so what you're paying today is that whatever 3% in inflation rate increase.
And
That's
it
it.
will go up every year? So we will, every year there will be an increase in the cost?
Unless there's going to be an increase, or you need a negative, you need a decrease, I
That will
suppose.
never happen, nice try.
Who calculates that is
Who
the
would
next
decide that
question.
then on the
So,
inflation rate?
so every year, or however often you want them to do it, you would have the financial staff from the cities and the counties say, this is what the inflationary rate is. And that's not your cost of living, it's not your consumer price index, it's the construction index. So we pull something from ENR, RAND, we would use actual engineering inflationary, so if lumber or concrete's gone up, that's where we're gonna pull that percentage. We'll bring that percentage to you and say this is our recommendation for the inflationary increase, and you would consider that.
Okay.
So it would not be automatic then?
I mean, I don't remember how you all wrote the ordinances. In some, I mean, I don't think it has to go in before the commission again every year, but it does at least, I mean, if it doesn't, I would think it would be part of your process
Right,
to
so
just have you look at it every
There
year.
is a secondary document to the document that Jeff has shared with you, which is the actual Title 12 of Elmore County Code, which is on top here of this handout. So that has actually all those calculations that Anne is talking about, how it will be executed year over year and what kind of intergovernmental agreement. So really the administration of this document is written in Title 12 of Elmore County Code, and all those details are in there.
And that addresses the inflation rate within that
All of
document,
that,
correct?
yes.
And what does it say inside of it for the inflation rate?
I
It's
can't
whatever
recall
the rate
right now.
is. The statute just says it's whatever the rate
Rate
is,
is.
so staff has to calculate the rate and present it for review.
And so if it's presented at the county for review, given this situation, would it also have to come through the
Yes.
city's?
Yes.
You are
Yes,
the
you all
collective
will be doing
defect
that
for the,
Okay.
your stuff.
and I can't remember if in Mountain Home we put an inflationary index in, but it could be the same process that it would come before you did it. I think some cities don't do it for whatever reason. You can do whatever you want. The risk is by not doing inflation, then it's usually a big increase, in the next 5-year update. But there's no rule that you have to or don't have to.
And so what Anne said is very important to remember is normally the capital improvements plan gets revisited like comprehensively every 5 years, and that is required by state statute. So that is the standard that state has established. We can revisit it more frequently if we want to, but jumping to conclusion too soon could be counterintuitive too, because it's really tied to the growth, per unit growth. So you're really not over collecting or under collecting. The CIP is tied to the per unit growth in Elmore County.
Basically, the further you can stretch your data sets out both sides, the more accurate your averages are going to end up being.
Until the
more
last 5 years,
the-
data didn't really help us.
Yeah, yeah, well, I mean, but.
Right, you
but-
get a longer period of time.
Yeah, but it's more accurate.
And it's always surprising to me when I look back at projections I made 10 years ago, which we were sure would be wrong, and they're exactly right on. Because it's statistics, unfortunately,
Yeah.
that just
Yeah.
does its thing.
Mark
Yeah.
Twain's got a wonderful quote about statistics.
What?
Lies, damn lies and statistics.
Yeah.
Prove anything with statistics. Bamboozle people.
I think the final thing that I would say is that I hear your concern about growth in one area not serving another area, and what is nice about this is that the CIP is already broken out essentially by geographical area. So there are 3 stations, let's take Mayfield out, there are 3 stations that are anticipated within EMS, there's gonna be a Mountain Home bucket, a Glens Ferry bucket, and an unincorporated county bucket. And if everything were exactly right on in 10 years, all of those buckets would be exactly as much as we needed to build the stuff that's in this list. That's not going to happen, which is why every year you make sure that things adjust as normal. But I think you will be able to see every year that the money, because Mountain Home is currently growing faster, there's going to be more money in Mountain Home's impact fee account than there might be in the unincorporated county, for example.
Growing faster than what? Than the early estimates?
There's more growth in the incorporated Mountain Home city than there is in the unincorporated county. So Mountain Home's bucket doesn't belong to Mountain Home, but the bucket of money that Mountain Home Growth has paid for EMS is just going to grow faster, and I'm going to bet that it's the Mountain Home West station that has to be built first. So that works really well. So you're going to see the money for the Pine, Glens Ferry stations accumulating more slowly, but that makes sense because they don't have that, that amount of growth that's really necessitating it. Will be you in Mountain Home that your growth that's necessitating it faster. It will be built in Glens Ferry and in Pine when those amounts, when growth creates that same need.
It sounds quite equitable, as long as all of the bookkeeping part of it gets dealt with. But it sounds like you guys kind of have, you've already got the multipliers figured out for everything, so yeah, that's good. Okay.
Anyone else have questions of me? All of you quiet guys down here?
Can I make one other comment? We kind of.
You're a sponge. I forgot you're a sponge.
Who decides who gets what when? So the city of Glens Ferry, the city of Mountain Home needs this, they need this. Who is that decision maker?
Okay, I think that was what I was just referring to, is that it's going to be, I can't build a station until I have the money there. So if Glens Ferry isn't growing as fast and they don't have enough money for a station, they're not going to be building a station.
I get all that, but when we do have the money, when the city has the money, who decides
Okay,
where that money's getting allocated?
The county will have the money, and every year they're going to come to you and say, hey, guess what? We have enough for a station now, and there's enough growth that we really need the station in Mountain Home West. And we are ready to spend these impact fees next year, and you're going to say, I've looked at everything. Yes, that's right. The money's in the account. Yes, there's growth. Those people need a station. Yes, go ahead and spend that money because that money was what.
Who is that person?
You.
I think if I can answer that one.
Us.
That's the whole committee.
The committee.
Us as a committee.
All of you committees.
All of you and all of us working together.
Everybody.
It's gonna
So
go.
it's another meeting like this that
Yes.
decides that
Yeah.
this particular area wants this.
And they're not going to have enough money to buy anything for a while.
Well, I get all that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering who was wearing the big cap
So-
here.
You have the biggest cap. Yes.
But
They can't go
Denver,
spend
that
money.
has not
if the
happened
state's not.
today. To the best of my knowledge, that historically has not happened that way.
So
Hence this meeting.
Okay.
for City of Mountain Home, that has not happened. We had our annual meeting for Elmore County in which we shared the number with the advisory committee. We had both these individuals in the room. We asked them, you have this much money available. Do you have any need this year? And they said they don't have any need because it doesn't buy anything from the money they had collected up to this point.
But
And
it's
so
still
that
a meeting,
discussion
it's
is
an entire
happening in
group
front of-
meeting, we all discuss it.
Right, in front of the advisory committee. That's it.
That's why the statute requires you to meet at least once a year. So.
That's what we do in that meeting, is discuss
Right,
those things.
you're kind of the oversight body, is to say, yeah, this looks right, and, no, I don't think you were supposed to spend the money on that, because it says this in this report.
I have another question here.
Yeah.
Back to square footage on the house. One house is $153. And then that's per person in the house, that 2 or 3, whatever. Do you check to see who's in the house? Is it a smaller house, a bigger house,
Because we
4-bedroom house?
we obviously.
I know we kind of talked about this, but in this day and age, there's ADUs coming online. So what are they, 600 square feet?
You obviously can make things as granular as possible, and all it does is should never have to come respond to me. The county can decide, and usually it goes through you, should we give this bionic woman an exemption? I would hope you would say no. But, that's how we take care of the one-offs or the outliers.
That doesn't
Corporate
make
is
sense
outbound.
if your impact fee is based on the construction of the project at the time you pull a building permit. That doesn't make sense.
I know, but people sometimes have what-if questions, and that's just the answer to a what-if.
Okay.
Is that if people have what-ifs, they are welcome to plead their case.
How do these apply to accessory structures such as sheds and garages?
And so that's a very good question. I think now we'll jump into with your permission, Ann and Abby, the execution of this. So we adopted the fees in February of 2023, the Board of County Commissioners, and then we have to advertise it and adopt the ordinance and put it in the newspaper and allow for the people to appeal that, and all that ended, and then May 25th onwards we started collecting the actual impact fees. And James has shared, you want to talk about the handout that you shared and how you assess them when people are coming up.
So you guys
it's a handout that looks like this. So this should be at your desk. You want me to talk?
No, I can do it. So that might answer your question, just so, I don't know if you guys can all see that sheet. So on there, and I have Ozzy on speed dial with this, because some of them are confusing. So this is my guide that I go off if they're going to have impact fees or not. Like a shed or a shop, that's going to go off square footage is what we do on that one.
Regardless of whether it's residential or commercial.
Well, yeah, commercial, it's going to go off square. So then,
ADU is different.
yeah, ADU is going to be.
Accessory dwelling units,
Yeah,
just so
yeah.
everybody understands
It's
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's going to be calculated as a residential unit in and of itself.
Yes.
So James, based on this, you have a yes next to accessory building structure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the $438 you're looking at for EMS, right? Roughly $438.78 or something like that. You're dividing that fee by the square footage and then applying it that way, or how does that work?
On your guys are going to have on Mitra's handout.
You're using a residential amount?
Yeah.
So that's per house, it's that amount. If it's a
So
use
for a
that,
shed,
if
I'm
it's
gonna
a
pay
use that's,
$438.
no, if it's a use that's non-residential, it would go by
The square footage.
point
That's
12 cents.
So what you're saying is garages and sheds are going to be non-residential uses, and they'll go by the square footage for their rate.
Yeah.
Again, we have the individualized assessment. We have, it's conditioned on the definition of development and how our ordinance is written, how these are going to be applied. So, to the extent that we're going to do an intergovernmental agreement that has the fee payer going over to the county to pay the fees, then we're going to have James deciding whether or not you're going to be subject to a certain fee. So, if you have, for example, the Idaho Power situation, where we're going to let them put a garage on and not going to assess the fee, we need to transmit what our development said. A residential house with a detached garage.
Jeff, isn't this sort of an administrative thing that the city and the county would work out
Yeah.
in their building departments?
Right.
But I think for us to understand what you're planning on,
Right.
we kind of need to know right now.
So what we do is when we have those individual assessment discussion come up, for example, we had a dairy that was, too large, and when we assessed their fees, it was too high, but we did feel that they have to have impact fee assessed. And so we asked Ozzy and Ann again. We went back to them and said, hey, how do you think, what should we assess this as? Because James started as industrial and that number was very high. So they made a recommendation to us. We shared it with the Board of County Commissioners when the dairy came to say we want an individualized assessment. The Board of County Commissioners liked what Ozzy and Ann had proposed, which is 1/4 of the amount for that particular dairy. And so,
So you're telling me that in order for us to make a determination, we have to send it to a board?
No, I think we're getting really off in the weeds here.
Yeah.
I think this is really, it's generally, and then you're right, you have the 95% of the time this is how it's done. if there is someone that says, wants to say, you know, this is a shed that no one will ever enter, blah, 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 you know, I don't need to pay the fee. These are things that I think the building departments will want to equally apply, and since this has sort of been done out of order, just because I think you're trying to get one thing accomplished tonight, maybe you can say that's a parking lot item that needs to be dealt with.
Well, I think to get to your point, the main point in how these fees are structured is you have one cutoff. If it's residential, then it's going to be one per door fee of $438. No matter how many outbuildings it has, it's a residence. It's going to cost so many ambulance trips. And if you have non-residential use, that's the square footage you need. We would probably end up, I don't know how exactly we would do it, but between our city ordinance and this building department, we would come up with an equitable way to make sure that these things don't come up. But for the purposes of what you're trying to determine tonight, that is this CIP something you can recommend we follow? Just know that residential is per door, a flat amount, and then the square footage comes in when you build something that is a non-residential use. And my hand is going to be on the pen when we write it down for sure, because I've dealt with this stuff before.
7 million.
What's that?
7 million times.
Can I ask for clarification about one half a subject back? When you were talking about how when they decide there's enough money in the fund, we can go ahead and okay, starting this project here. I guess I misunderstood. I thought that projects were specifically named and were part of the impact fee fund right there. So you don't get to choose what you're gonna do with the money. It's already been pre-decided.
Right, you can choose when you do it. So on page 22, there are 4 stations listed.
Right.
It would make sense that they would build the one where there's the most money.
Yeah.
That would mean there's the most growth there.
Yeah.
But they can't build it in year 1. So as, you know, courtesy, they would come to you and say, hey, we have enough money to build Mountain Home West Station. And you would say, yes, you do have enough money. Yes, that was on the impact fee calculations. Go. Build and buy.
So, I do not understand how we're going to build a $500,000 facility with the current rate of growth in this area within 8 years with an exception to extend for 3, potentially, or 2 based on that document. How do we ever get to the point where we can build a fire station? Oh, and by the way, we have to also provide an ambulance and equipment. I mean, that expense right there, I don't see how we're ever going to get to that in an 8 to 10 year period. We don't have enough growth.
But this is based on a 10-year plan. So just imagine it's an 8-year plan. Calculated how much growth, every unit of growth has a proportionate share of that station. Once you reach that much growth, you will have that much money, you will build that station. If you grow faster or slower, you
I'm
adjust.
trying to figure out how many that's going to take. So $500,000 is, you know, at $436 a unit.
Right, so I took the cost of the station divided by who's coming, and that's how I got the 426. If all those people come, times 426, I have the amount of money for the station. So that is the money, the math works forward and backwards and comes up with the same place.
And this is why we really need to have these fees collected, because every unit that gets built in City of Mountain Home or Glens Ferry, it's a lost opportunity for all of us collectively as taxpayers of this county.
Well, like I said, that's what I'm trying to rationalize.
Right.
Because let's look at November of 24, we had 13 new homes built here. So that's what we're going over is 13 new homes.
Right, when we wrote this 2 years ago, we did not have the assumption that it would take 2 years to implement. So I can't really adjust for that now. I can just say when and if you become comfortable with this, the longer you wait to make a decision at all, the whole system would really need to be reworked at that before.
And that is why we have been trying to bring both cities on board since almost 2021. As you can see in this timeline, we have made multiple efforts to get both cities on board so that every unit that is being built within Elmore County is paying for our service needs, otherwise taxpayers unfortunately are paying.
See, and all I'm understanding is we've had one meeting on this since November, and now this is the second meeting. So I was never aware of it as a part of the People Advisory Board or the P&Z. I've never been aware of that.
Right, and that's why this timeline is important to understand that I have been in front of the Glens Ferry Council and the Mountain Home Council multiple times over the last couple of years for the same reason, that really we need to start collecting these sooner than later.
And one other point I'd like to make is there is the ability for the municipality, whether it's the city or the county, to help fill the gap too on funding. So let's just say it's a $500,000 need for the building, and you've collected $300,000 in a certain time frame. There is completely the ability to come to the county or the city and say, can you fund the other $200,000 it's going to take to get a shovel in the ground on this building now? So there is the ability to do that too. To your point, if this committee thought, even though the growth has not funded this as we thought it would, we still feel like the growth has necessitated a bigger need, there would be the ability to make that request for funding.
So where does that money come from?
Well, in that situation, it would be,
loan from the general fund?
it would be the general fund.
Yeah,
Loan.
or a grant, yeah, from the fund.
Would it be a loan or would it be a grant that gets repaid?
It would just,
However you structured it.
it would just be the city or the county making that distribution
So
from
that'd
the
be city
general fund.
council and
Or the county, yeah.
making that determination.
So,
Who keeps the interest on these funds these bank accounts that the funds are being held in? How does that work?
So they have to they can't be mixed with the general fund. That's
Okay,
part of the
so does
statute.
each city have its own?
No, we're talking about EMS fees, and those are going to go through the county.
Okay.
So the county, currently Mountain Home collects its own impact fees.
Right.
You have an account in Mountain Home. That account is divided into streets, parks, police, fire. The money goes into those buckets, and you all do your thing with that. County will do the same thing. They will have a separate account. It cannot be the same account the tax dollars are in. It's actually a separate account, and that account will have sub-accounts for jail, sheriff, and EMS. That's what they're collecting, or at least whatever you're collecting now. And those financial reports can be looked at by anyone at any time. They're the same as the city's financial.
Well, it wasn't the financial reports necessarily. I was just interested in the cumulative interest in all the accounts being put together. Does it amount to an amount that's sort of a line item on the statements?
Sure.
And does it get divided up between all the funds?
Yes. So the statute allows you to put it in an interest-bearing account, and if I were the accountant, I would proportionately allocate the interest among those accounts.
I have a couple questions. From my understanding of this conversation, it sounds like when we're collecting, just say EMS, the impact fee for EMS, yes, we have these 4 different stations with Mayfield, not being included in that, but it's going into one pot, correct?
Well, no, what I'm saying is that what I've heard the cities say is they feel really concerned that the money collected in their boundaries not be used somewhere else.
Right.
So I think what we're all suggesting is go ahead and divide it. As the money comes in for EMS, put it into a EMS Mountain Home, EMS Glens Ferry, EMS unincorporated county. What's nice is that the CIP is sort of broken out that way. There's a station in Mountain Home, a station in Glens Ferry, and a station in unincorporated county. So that's fine. The stations are all, the same amount, and so that would allow you. Now I can't tell you. I mean, is the Mountain Home West station actually in the boundaries of Mountain Home? I don't know. That doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter where it's built. It matters who it serves. If I'm going to build a house in Mountain Home, I want my money to build a station that's going to serve the people in that house.
Right.
general ledger, you're gonna have 3 sub-accounts for the 3 geographical areas. You'll have $100 of interest, and you'll divide it proportionally among those funds. That was a very weedy question.
So why wouldn't we just allocate it to a Mount Home City exact checking account, savings account, whatever? That way, whenever it accrues, it accrues. Can you separate it that way?
That's what we're
possible?
suggesting doing.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
that's what we're suggesting.
If you want to have 7 different bank accounts, that's just weird. But I think what we're suggesting is you account for the money in silos. There's a Mount Home silo, and so the money can only be journal entry from your account to the district's actual "we're ready to buy an ambulance" account. And it's for an ambulance that's going to respond to your heart attack.
So, sorry to add on to this. So, I guess my question is, and maybe I'm just not understanding this and that, but Boise breaks up their boundaries. They actually have districts
Just
in
for
there
parks.
for their parks.
Just for parks.
So, is that
Because
something?
parks is not a mutually reinforcing, and that's not true actually. They only have it broken out for pocket parks and neighborhood parks.
Okay.
Because those parks are meant to be a 5-minute walk from a house. Those big regional parks like Julia Davis, those are an everyone parks. So if I live in Boise Depot Bench and I build a house there, we'd pay X number of dollars for my neighborhood parks, and then X number of dollars for foothills trails, etc.
And if I could interrupt, Brendan, what was your full question?
So my full question, Karen, is on the districts. Is there something on our committee that we can decide that it's a district and it stays in within that district and it's actually loaded out? Because I know from the CIP from the city, it was discussed about having different boundaries and everything, but it was the recommendation that we didn't because of our size. So I'm wondering if we can actually put something formal that's saying, we collected this in Mountain Home, this is for the Mountain Home District, the West Station, and it's going to stay there.
I think that's what I said.
I just want to make sure that that is on
That's
the record.
exactly what
because
I'm saying.
I
Yes.
want to make sure that that is that, and that's not this, we're going to split it up here 4 ways or anything. And
No,
then
I think I've been very clear
Okay, I
that
just
there
wanna
are
make sure.
3 there are trifurcated accounts. The money goes in it, and it's to be spent for something that serves that growth.
Okay.
Now, the
If I could add-
more
sorry.
granular you make it, the more difficult you're going to make it on yourselves. And that's up to you, because if you end up short in an account and you need $20, but you don't have the money all in one, so that's just what Boise has found, and why ACHD chose not to do it, is that it's given them accounts where they don't ever have enough money to build something, and then they get legal. But that's
Yeah.
fine. I
Yeah.
get that this feels better to all of you, to be sure that you're tracking the money into the geographical area. I am following Jeff's and Abby's suggestion that you put it in accounts by geographic area and spend it out of those accounts by geographic
Okay.
area.
And there'll be the accounting side of it, but then there'll also be the legal implementation side of it. And that's the effort that Jeff and I will work on, to make sure that the ordinance actually states, here's how we intend to do this, which is by service areas, districts. But also, I would suggest the committees are probably going to want to have the ability to flex that too at their discretion, right? So if there's something where the committees say the $20 example, right? And you're going to want that discretion. So that's what we can work on the legal side for the implementation.
And Abby, I'll jump in really quickly. Brenda, this is in coordination with what you're saying. I think what you just said, and then the spirit of what you're saying as well, is what I would be interested in. Is I think there needs to be checks and balances for bank accounts, and so having this information rather than in a spreadsheet where somebody can input whatever information they want, that we get ledgers of that information. So an accounting ledger that indicates that this money was collected for this specific district or specific service area, and we have this, I'm going to say pot of gold, pot of copper, to spend in this district for this specific thing. But having an accounting ledger would be important.
Understood.
So then, let me ask this question. So when it comes to FOIA requests, because I hear about FOIA requests in this community all the time. I don't know if they happen, I just hear about it. So is that something that the average citizen would be able to request? Say, hey, can I get a copy of this so I can watch this? I don't know if that's something that's possible or how that would work. Does that cause a fee or anything like that?
So here's what has to happen. Here's what the county's ordinance has to require. This is what the city's ordinance has to require. Because you can't have an ordinance that doesn't follow this statute. Statute 678210, earmarking and expenditure of collective fees. An ordinance imposing impact fees shall provide that all impact fees funds shall be maintained in one or more interest-bearing accounts within the capital fund. Accounting records shall be maintained, so to Terrence's point, not just a random spreadsheet, but a formal accounting record. For each category of system improvements, interest earned on development fees shall be considered funds in the account on which it's earned. Expenditures shall be made only, let's see, where is it here? As part of its annual audit process, a governmental entity shall prepare an annual report describing the amount of all development impact fees collected, appropriated, or spent during the preceding year, describing the percentage of tax and revenues other than impact fees collected. That has to be like at the ready. In other words, that's a report they should be able to go, here you go. Okay, thanks. So that's a requirement, and that's got to be put forth.
But to your question about a public records request or a FOIA request, yes, any record that's kept in the normal course of business for the county or the city is subject to a public records request. Now, there's exceptions to that.
What about fees associated with that? Are there fees associated with doing those requests?
So the first 2 hours that it takes of staff time to provide the answer to a public records request is free. After that, it's charged at the normal staff rate to provide that information.
I just had to deal with this stuff on the base, and over the years, I just kind of worry about people getting, hey, I want this, and everybody turns around and starts asking for it.
Oh yeah, we deal with that all
So
the time.
this report would not be one that would be subject to a fee, because it's a report they're required to produce that exists. It does require any staff time to make special.
That's what I was getting at.
That one's got to be in the drawer and ready to hand.
But for example, if they were asking for something outside of the report that was normally
Right.
generated, if they wanted it broken down in a different
You
way,
gotta pay for the fees, you gotta pay the time.
yes.
That's what I was doing.
So back to the, this loan thing just keeps going through my brain. And as discussed on the county side 2 years ago, there was discussion, obviously, if you need a facility, but you don't have the cash. There was discussion of loans. I don't know how the city attacked that hurdle. I have no idea. So I guess number one, need a little bit of help on that. But number two, there was great discussion on that, and literally what that is it's a loan back from the general fund if the funds are not there. So in a nutshell, this stuff is supposed to pay for itself. If you take a loan from the general fund, it's not paying for itself anymore.
If the loan didn't get
Go
repaid,
after
you'd be
she's
correct.
paying for it also.
Once the loan's repaid, it's get paid for.
Understood. But we haggled it quite a bit here a couple, 3 years ago. And I just want to get it on the table so people understand. Or, quite frankly, maybe I don't understand. So, as a clarity, I guess, for everyone involved, if Jeff and Abby, if you can spread the word on that somehow, help us understand that I see it as a loan from the general fund that I guess politically, or accounting wise, that can be maneuvered. But as presented, where are we going with something like that?
And who makes that decision?
And who makes that decision? Because then at that point, it's out of our ballpark, I'm assuming.
Jeff, I'm the one that probably gave him that idea, so maybe I should just clarify. I'm probably guilty
Yeah, you
here.
probably did.
I am probably the one that gave you this idea. You do understand it. It was a little esoteric. I think I was trying to explain that if you had an opportunity, let's say you got the chance to buy a parcel of land that you needed, and you only had and you needed $10,000 or whatever it was, and the general fund can loan the money to be paid back with the next impact fees, so that it's just a timing thing, you are legally allowed to do that. It is totally a decision among all of the elected bodies whether or not they did that. Now, if the general fund gave the money, said, you know what, we'll just pay for some of this because we got extra money sitting around, that, yes, is a subsidy. It's taxpayers choosing to subsidize growth. That's a different conversation that I don't see happen very often. What I think in that example was talking about is if you have an opportunity to buy land or borrow money or whatever at today's costs by loaning some money out of the general fund, some cities do that. Not a thing that a lot of people consider.
What's the repayment timeline required for something like that?
Whatever y'all want to do. I would just take that off the table and say, you're probably getting way too complicated for your everyday transactions at this point.
I would put that in the ink and a half.
Yes. I think it came up.
Yeah. I don't even know how that would look.
So that's why the question is that.
Yeah, I don't know how you call that a loan to the general fund.
It has happened. I probably wouldn't expect to see it here.
Yeah.
So it would be more of a grant or hey, we're just gonna fund it?
I would just say you're probably so far in the weeds now, it's not gonna, if it ever came up, you would be informed about it and asked to participate.
But yes, just a general distribution from whatever fund it was. So let's say it's Allen's EMS fund from the county, right?
Right.
And you're saying we need an extra 100,000 to make this happen. They've got an extra 400,000 sitting there. Okay, great. We're going to give you 100,000 to make this happen.
But the reverse is not true, so we can't
No.
loan money out of the impact fees at all to another area.
No.
No.
Okay, just wanna make sure I understood it.
I mean, you could, I won't get into it. No, you cannot ever give impact fee money for the general fund. It cannot be
Could you
mixed.
run that by me again, please, what you just said? I'm sorry.
So I'm saying in the event that there was a funding gap on something, I think the more likely scenario would not be a loan. It would be just the county or the city saying, in our budget for this item, for our EMS budget for the year, we have some extra cash, and we're going to just contribute that to make this building actually happen.
But that would be out of the normal taxpayer budget.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, normal,
Correct.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
That wasn't the answer we wanted.
Yes, it
Want
makes
the answer
sense.
to be.
Whether I agree with it or not.
How do you repay back the loan?
Again, very, very complicated, and it's never gonna happen here, so.
A loan from a general fund with the expectation the general fund gets it back from the impact fees is ill-advised, because it's a dodgy proposition. You're gonna get the impact fees to begin with.
Did it happen in the city of Boise? Yes. Was it dodgy? Yes. Case closed.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
So, not gonna happen. That's the bottom line, that's not.
So,
And in some cities, we're talking tens of dollars. So, we're not, less than.
if I understand this correctly, we're not talking about a loan. We're talking about taking the kind of responsible long-distance look at, we know that Christmas is coming, and so you better start saving now, so you're not having to save like mad in the month of November, because Christmas is coming.
That is exactly what we're doing.
So we're not talking about loans, we're not talking about hinky, we're talking about harnessing one little possible source of income and start dribbling it into buckets. And if we keep after it long enough, we might earn ourselves an EMT station.
Would you like to be an impact fee consultant?
No.
I wouldn't think so.
But is that,
That is exactly what we're doing.
I don't know, I'll take umbrage with Christmas. Christmas we know is going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be growth.
well,
We don't know that there will be a need.
but,
Boise
but,
is shrinking.
but it's self-regulating. If there's no money coming in, it's because You know, the corollary to that is that there is no additional need, and this thing is supposed to be funding future additional need, not our needs right now. So it kind of works together, you know. If we don't have the growth and there's not very much money coming in, then the demand that this substation has been proposed to be built is taking into account as the basis of need isn't there. So
Right, so it doesn't get built. That's
so
exactly
it
right.
doesn't need to be built.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it takes care of itself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hence, not Christmas.
We'll be doing refunds.
Correct.
You wouldn't do a refund. There would be something that was growth related that needed to be purchased. You'd buy a zolmeter or something.
So within the 8 years, if it's not extended in that 8-year period.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
That's on equipment though, so I have a question for, say, a substation. If, I'm trying to wrap my brain around this whole growth rate, and if we don't, it seems like it keeps coming up of, you know, if 10 years or 8 years goes by and we weren't growing up to 4%, then did we have growth to collect for the substation, and at the end of the 8 years, we only say collected 50% of what's needed?
First of all, you have to do this whole process again in 5 years at the latest. So in 5 years, you can restart every single assumption in this.
Okay.
And the fact that you will be looking at actual growth, actual money collected on an annual basis, or more frequently if you want to, you're never going to be able to get that far off of what's supposed to happen before you can course correct. 20 years ago, cities were not paying attention and things got out of control, and that's why the statute became much more tight. In my opinion and my experience, it is very hard to legally get out of whack. There are just so many control points where you have to, that I in 20 years actually just never experienced these kinds of
Chaotic.
understanding the concerns. Totally. It has actually never gotten to that place because there are just too many controls in place to allow it to. And it is anticipated and required in the statute that we keep recalibrating to reality as we go.
So how do we calculate reality? That's what I'm trying to get at. Is the growth rate something that is taken into consideration?
It's into consideration for me to have a general idea. Okay, the growth rate doesn't drive the fee.
Okay.
The growth rate drives me asking Alan, how much stuff are you going to need if we grow the way we've kept growing? That's good long-term capital planning, right? Like, how many presents are we going to need to buy if Christmas is the same kind of Christmas as it was last year? Now, if something happens between April and December, I will course correct. We'll tell my kids, too bad, so sad, we're not having Christmas this year, and we will adjust. That growth rate is not how I come up with the fee. I come up with the fee by establishing a relationship between one house and its proportional share of space and equipment. I start with a growth rate just to have some variables in place, but it's that one-to-one relationship that goes forward slower or faster than I anticipated. It's still going to be that amount. And it's still going to add up at some point to an amount. If you get if we literally just, there's no growth ever again, you'll just stop collecting impact fees. That's the way to stop it. But at least in the last 20 years, there has never been a period of 10 years where the market has not course corrected enough in the aggregate over 10 years to not get us back to where we anticipated. If that were to occur, you have so many ways to solve that.
And also to think through the construction phases of any facility capital planning, you can just go ahead and buy the land in the next 10 years instead of building the whole building, right? You can just do the architectural design drawings for that building in the first, you know, from the money that you collect, you need to break it down into the capital improvement of the whole structure. And so think about it in that context, like, you know, if we didn't collect enough for the whole structure, maybe we collected enough to just pour the concrete in the next 10 years. And that's still a progress towards growth, supporting
Those
itself.
people's share of a station that just will be built a little bit later than EMS.
Another thing that's important to note is that each, you have to be, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee has to meet annually. So annually, you're going to review the money you collected and the CAP. Minimum 5 years, you evaluate the CAP. There's nothing that precludes you from doing so more frequently. And a thing that just dawned on me, Abby, is that if you recommend that each of the cities adopt this CIP, we have to form, so not only is there a Mountain Home Impact Fee Advisory Committee, not only is there a Glens Ferry Impact Fee Advisory Committee, not only is there a county one, we're going to have to make a new one, an intergovernmental agreement called the Impact Fee Advisory Committee that will just be whole, the sum of all, I think. And that will necessarily involve these guys with this whole CIP. So to your concern about growth not occurring and then having to recalibrate, you will all be part of that process as it goes along.
So the fees that are collected outside of the cities, so outside of Glens Ferry and outside of Mountain Home, where did those fees go? So outside of Pine, are those just going to help fund some of these projects, the ones in Pine? Or how does that?
Alan's going to have to look at from what station would development in the unincorporated county come from. And so maybe a whole station gets built in Pine, and that station it has to serve all of the North County.
So
And then
anything
it
within the
relies on
county
Glens
can
Ferry,
go
so
to
they're going to
each
put
of
their
these
money
stations.
wherever it needs to go. Yeah, and that would be something as he's ready to spend that money, would come to this committee and talk about.
The same aspect here, Brenda, would be the same thing, because everything outside of Mountain Home in the county area we're collecting may help build this station here in town too.
Right.
So it's kind of works both directions, you know, what's the best to serve our population with and where at.
Where's the most need?
Yeah, so, you know, that's stuff we just have to sit and look at, you know, based on the population, the growth areas and the access and everything that goes with that. So.
Excuse me, did you just say that they could possibly use money that was collected from the unincorporated county part to help build something in the city? Did I just hear you say that?
Because I could take the same money from
I thought
everywhere
that
and come back to Glens Ferry as well to build substation down there or add on or do whatever. So it comes back to where we see the need is, and then I have to come back to all you guys to say, here's what we see as our need. Can you look at making this happen?
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
View the county's bucket more as a slush fund, right?
Right,
That can
right.
then be allocated to where the
That's
need
a discretionary fund. Yeah.
So I think trying to keep us on schedule, are there any other comments for Ann or questions for Ann before we move to item 5?
I have one quick question. So we are just discussing EMS.
At this point, yes.
Right.
We understand that there's been a lot of questions related to the jail fee calculation, sheriff fee calculation, so we thought it best to just try and move forward with implementing EMS, revisit the other two at a future date. So if there are no other questions for Ann, I think the next task for the committees is to have a discussion on implementation of the EMS side of this. Jeff kind of went over the next steps of that, but it's up to the committees to make a determination if you're prepared to move forward with the EMS side of implementation.
So from my standpoint, I'm not speaking for anybody else here, but I think we've acquired a lot of information here. I haven't had a chance to read through this entire document.
All I ask is, like I said, look at it, study it, ask the questions. Sounds like poor Ann is doing a really good job of answering those. Definitely look at commercial, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to kill commercial development inside city. If that, you know, just, I guess, just look at that. Residential, you guys are do you. You're smart, so I appreciate y'all. It's time, and once it's spent, you can't get it back. So I appreciate y'all doing your due diligence. Abby, nice to see you as always.
Likewise.
Schroeder, you know, but no.
I thought you were leaving.
I'm going. Thank you guys.
A quick question here. Oh my God, I'm having such a senior moment right now. It just went right out of my head, and it was kind of important. Never mind.
Not to interrupt.
Oh, I know what it was.
Go ahead.
So why are you guys wanting to focus right now so much on the EMS? Is it because of a perceived need that the EMS service needs to be started being saved for and all that all at once? Or is it just to make it go through quicker? And then I guess I just want to, is there like something about the parts of this that are for the jail and for the sheriff's department and that, are those expected to take more time or meet with more opposition or something? I'm just curious why this is the one.
I think it's twofold. There is a very acute need for funding for EMS at this point. So it is very much a time we need it now. And Alan can speak to that. The second is that we have heard from the committees that they have more questions about how jail was calculated. So instead of trying to dig into that today, we said we have heard feedback that there is more comfort with the EMS fees and getting those implemented quicker. So need and comfort with the calculation on EMS.
But going back to Glens Ferry's impact fees, you know, City of Mountain Home has their own police department, so they don't want to pay for the sheriff patrol fees. But Glens Ferry also has sheriff patrol, which is something that, you know, I think we should keep on our radar.
Yeah. No, I was just curious about the reason why.
Alan, do you want to just give everyone an idea of what you're seeing with call volume?
So just real quick, I took over as director in 2019 the ambulance service stuff and started really tracking things in. I've been with the county since on and off with the emergency services side since 1986. So, you know, a good pulse back quite a ways on this, and I've watched the ambulance over the years and the growth that we've done and the growth around town. And Bill, you know, I've been a builder / business owner around here since 1983 as well. So I've been a big part of the growth in town. But just quick numbers. We're running a little over 3,000 calls a year, just EMS. Okay. Mountain Home Fire has 121 calls in 2023. Mountain Home Rural had 67 calls. Rescue had 250 calls. So EMS on its own is over 3,000 calls. Now breaking that down last year when we pulled the numbers out, 67% of those calls are inside the city limits of Mountain Home. Okay, so our big push is in this incorporated area right here. Now that doesn't put any of the rest of them out of any priority, but that's where the big call volume is at. And with the way things have structured around here, our station is set down off of American Legion by the jail. With everything else that's gone on, with the growth that's now going out South Meth West, Highway 51 area, the apartments, upcoming industrial area, a lot of our call volume is on the west side of town, and we've seen that for quite a while. You know, there's a lot of apartments over there, there's more apartments over there, there's senior housing areas over there. It's become critical to be able to respond to that side of town in a more efficient manner, and right now, we're anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes to get across town. it's even worse. Somebody without oxygen or a pulse has got about 4 minutes before they start doing brain damage. And that's just unacceptable to us to be able to be that far out for a majority of your calls. So that's what's driving this need for this west side station. We have personnel right now. We've got 2 full-time crews on in Mountain Home, but they're both based in the same station. That's all we have. We don't have anywhere else to go. So literally, if we had a facility, we could split crews right now and have somebody on the other side of town to be able to respond quicker. We just don't have the funds to do a building. Medicare, Medicaid, Blue Cross, TRICARE are all insurance companies, and they're all have their rates based out of legislators. And that comes out of Congress, and no matter what our rate schedule is for billing, we're only going to recuperate so much money. Medicare and Medicaid pays about 29% of our actual billing, actual cost that we have to make a run. So, we bill out $2,000, we get $800 for it. Well, you can't even cover your operating costs, fuel, replacement of equipment, wages, manpower, that kind of stuff, just off your day-to-day stuff, let alone put together a build fund to be able to build a $500,000 station. So that's what we're running into with that. We're capable of providing the service, we just don't have the place to do it. And to be able to do that, that's why we need to be able to step up with that. So, Terry.
Alan, do you have a location for the west side station already selected or purchased? Or?
Well, we actually do right now, because a year ago the county was able to purchase the property where Corey's Auto is at over by the Elks Lodge. Right there, and it's got ground on it that's actually bare, that's room enough to put a station on. So here, we've lucked into that by them doing that. So now we have a location that's paid for. So that helps that cost of that. So that was a huge improvement with that part of that. So
Alan, are there studies that are required or recommended to figure out an appropriate location for an EMS facility? Is there something that we should be looking at for that? Because maybe that location is, bogged down by corners and traffic and stop signs or whatnot in that area.
It is, and there's probably that kind of stuff available. You can definitely look into that. We looked at places like on Airbase Road, but it's so busy. How do you get on Airbase Road without causing more problems? Last thing you do is throw the traffic lights up and stop everybody real quick there. So, you got to take the good with the bad and say, what works out the best. By having this property, obviously is a huge savings, right off the bat. And just looking at my side, also knowing that I'm a rural fire commissioner, which we're in kind of the same boat. We're collecting impact fees as well for the rural fire station for growth. We've outgrown where we're at. Getting out of that location it's at is getting harder and harder, so it makes response time more and more. Well, maybe there's a joint venture effort, and put a little bit bigger building on, and somebody else is paying 25-30% of it as well. And that's obviously stuff that we can do with this as well. So there's some options that way to help control costs and get the best bang for the buck. So maybe we don't need $500,000, we just need 3. And I've got another entity that says, hey, I've got 2 if we can share that with you, and work that deal out. And that's all stuff that we will definitely look at, and be able to present to, you guys as a whole. It says, look, we're close, we've got this opportunity, what do you think? And maybe we get it in 3 years instead of 8 years.
What would a study cost? So again, obviously if something happens to people in this community, I want a quick response to them to give them the best shot of survival, right?
Right.
So if we have a location right now, is it the best location, or is there potentially a better location that maybe we can trade out that property from? I don't know that answer, but I'm kind of curious if we could, maybe use some of this money to actually look at that, and if so, what's the cost of doing something like that?
We don't have any real hard data as far as the exact location of calls, so where's our big volume at? We're just not able to narrow that down. Our CAD system is not pinpoint down enough that we can map that down, as far as, was this certain area better off than this one? You know, a lot of it's gonna be just sit down and do a traffic study, you know, and even amongst ourselves, maybe go for a drive some afternoon and says, hey, let's go find a spot, you know, or, you know, come with me, help me pick something out, or maybe you've got a better idea that, hey, I know this guy's gonna sell this corner over here.
Would it be possible to put some sort of facility at the airport?
Probably too far out. See, we're getting farther out, we're coming back the other direction again, instead of being in the core, going out. So, you know, that's what we look at that way, so.
Now,
And that's studies, so.
I'm going to piggyback, actually, you may have already answered the question that I had, the follow-up question, which would be, do you keep a log? I don't want to get too granular, I actually love that word, but too granular, but you keep a log, and you clearly know how long it takes to get from point A to point B, pretty much anywhere in the city or anywhere in the county.
We could go back and pull our CAD program that we have now, Karen. We don't track it to where we could just print it out, but we could go look at and find a run that says from here to here, because that's all tracked through the
I'm not necessarily one that thinks that the studies are going to give you accurate information.
Yeah.
You're going to know
Exactly,
better.
both of these guys know when
Is
we
it
were.
8 a.m. or 8 p.m.? Is it noon time?
Absolutely.
You know, there's so many variables, and I know, Tim, just 2 seconds, and I'll get to you. 1 second, okay. But right now, not right now, but it's been inevitable, even with 2 full-time crews on here in town, we can set for hours without pager going off at all. No calls whatsoever. And the minute somebody hears the pager go off or the tone go off, it kind of flips their trigger. Oh, I got to call 911 too. So we may get 2 or 3 calls back to back to back. And what's that, once we get both of these rigs out here out on a call, we have to pull the ambulance out of Glens Ferry. They go to Hammond just to be closer, because there's probably a good chance there's going to be another call. Well, which direction is it? If we stay in Glens Ferry, it'll be west of Mountain Home. We bring them to Hammond, we got the chance to backfeed either direction. So we play that logistics game all day as well, you know, trying to keep people in places to get response as quick as we can without.
Does Orchard come into play in any of this?
What's that?
Does Orchard's fire facility and EMS facility?
No.
They don't play into any of this?
Okay, we got another question.
Tom's getting tired.
Okay.
I got 2 questions for you. If you're worried about Airbase Road and them trying to access onto Airbase Road, what kind of problems do they have getting onto American Legion then? Because I see them come out that side there.
Yep.
And it's the same road width as
Yep.
it is on Airbase Road.
And when we did that, Tim, if you notice, there's lights there on each side of American Legion. We put those in when 4 years ago, to try to help alleviate that. They're the big warning signs that we have control of in the ambulances. So when they leave the bay, they hit the button, they hit those lights. Hopefully, traffic will realize that and stop and give us that right of way, because those were $30,000 when we put them in. To put the full-blown crosswalk lights, you know, emergency vehicle lights in there, 5 years ago was $125,000. So okay,
Well,
let's try this
when
one
you come out by
first.
the old USDA building there,
Yep.
you come out there, there's a light down at 18th. Where's the other light at?
The 2 that I'm talking about are on each side of our driveway. There's one over by the old Scott's Desert Sage building,
Oh,
and
yeah.
one by that apartment or that office complex on the north side there.
But that doesn't stop the traffic then?
No, it's just caution lights.
Right.
Flash.
Yeah. Emergency vehicle exit.
Right. So why can't you do that on Airbase
Could.
Road?
Airbase Road just seems to be a lot busier, you know, and depending on where you're at on it. I'm not saying it wouldn't work.
You know me, I drive around this
Yep.
town 24/7, so
Yep.
I'll piggyback on him. When the base lets out, that is a big, huge area
Yep.
for problems even for us.
We do have,
I get it.
we do have all the major traffic lights set up all the way through town. They've got what we call the Opticom system. It's a little white mushroom that sets up on top of the light. And we have a sensor that controls that. So as we're coming at it, it'll turn the light green for us. It's supposed to, that everything's working perfectly. And on a good day, everybody will actually remember to stop as it's coming into it. Knock on wood, it's not been an issue. So that's another traffic safety thing. But it gives us time coming at those intersections. So Airbase Road, we would be right on it, coming right out, similar to what we're doing right now. So if we can find another way where we can come at the light a little bit off a block or so, I think it makes more sense, you know, it gives the time to set the light so we have access and stuff, so. But that's, you know, definitely open for discussion as far
Well,
as.
not long ago there in the corner of Third and American Legion, had green lights all 4 sides
Yeah, well,
when the ambulance was going through.
that's an ITD thing, so
Yeah,
we'll just save that for another
So
conversation.
your sensor thing ain't just working good.
Yeah.
Real quick, the other second question I have is,
That's your third question.
I can't count, I'm a plumber.
It's downhill.
Yeah, I'm always a half bubble off. Would you say a majority of your EMS calls are gonna be traffic oriented, like auto accidents compared to somebody at a house?
Actually, no, most of ours, especially in town, are medical related calls. You know, our traffic obviously is huge because we get the freeway out through here and everything else, but they're literally not a very big percentage of our overall calls. You know, we have a bedroom community, we have a lot of retirees that are here. You know, we have a lot of retirees outside, plus the senior housing areas.
Right.
We spend a lot of time medical calls that way that are the critical calls that way too.
And then my clarifying question was, you will not get to talk about where to cite it if you can't afford to buy it, am I correct?
Right.
Probably, just to bring us back to what you're here for.
But that
These are
comes-
wonderful conversations and would be
Agree with
so
that.
relevant when you had money in there. Yeah? Because you won't be able to build anything unless you want to pay for it out of your property taxes.
They keep going up every year anyway.
We'll go.
Yeah,
Let's get
more.
back on track, please. So,
Give me a
It's another
next
meeting.
Alan, I want to say, I'm gonna correct your half bubble in about 2 seconds.
I want to say thank you. It sounded like you were talking about the possibility of us doing some joint work together, you know, between county, city, things like that, so we can try to cover it. I think that's great, especially when we can get everybody together on that. Did you say last year you had 3,000 calls last year?
Yes.
Was that last year?
Yeah.
Okay. And then 67% of it was in the city?
Correct.
In the city limits?
It's inside the city limits. I actually had one of my staff sit down with all 3,000 runs and took the addresses and had to verify it that way, so.
Is there any chance we can just get a summary of that? I'd love to see something, just
Yeah,
to kind of see
I'll
on
see
the
if I can
report on
find
that.
that, definitely get that out. So.
Thank you, Alan.
Yep.
And I do have a question. So, back to the CIP for it. So when it's saying the projected 2031 population non-res vehicle trips, is that what Alan, sorry for better just to make sure, is that the same as Alan's talking about with the 3,000 calls a year? Is it
No, those
different?
are two totally different things. So we're using vehicle trips in order to identify how many square feet will be there. Nationally, the metric is the number of people will create the number of vehicle trips towards 4 different kinds of land use, and then you back into that. Vehicle trips equals square footage, and that's how I get square footage to charge the impact fee. Has nothing to do with his reality.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say.
It's just a very complicated way of being able to back up my non-residential.
So then that's going back to your calculation of what you're anticipating the growth will be, how many people are coming, is what's going to give us the trip count.
Right, so you have so many people that make rooftops, and we know if there's that many people, then you can extrapolate how much of each kind of land use there is by the number of trips. If I have 100 new people, 16 of them get Starbucks every day, and 2 of them go to the grocery store, and 1/2 of one person goes to the dairy. So that's kind of how it works.
And I guess that's kind of where my question is, maybe this is legal. If your numbers are off, where is your justification then when you're collecting these fees? Because isn't it in the Idaho code that talks about when we have mistakes, we have to do refunds and everything? When our calculations are
I
off?
think that's part of why they give you a number of years, you know, that the thing stays active. You know, all they're doing, I think they're trying to make projections. They're making educated guesses about what's going to happen going forward based on what they know has happened in the past. And whether they're right or not, you know, I think that in a way, if I'm seeing this right, I think it's a really elegantly crafted, self-regulating system.
Ooh, I like that.
I mean, it kind of, we could really, really overthink it, but I can absolutely see it's just a simple in and out, and if we get to the end and not enough people have moved in to make enough money to actually do something with, then obviously the thing that was supposed to be built wasn't needed anyway.
There's one additional item, variable you're not accounting for. Nobody moves in and the economy dies.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Not to
but
pick on
that's...
Glens Ferry, but how much new growth is there in Glens Ferry?
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, it took me umpteen
Why?
years before I could refinance my house because they couldn't find any comps.
So that's
Yeah.
actually, so Jennifer did, and I think the point you make is great. So the methodology, I don't take it on Bridgeway.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the data in. We're dealing with a function, okay? Not to
Well, yeah.
evoke mathematics here.
No, but
We're
it
plugging
is.
numbers in.
Yeah.
If the numbers are wrong, it's going to spit out garbage. We
Yeah.
want right numbers, and I can't
Yeah.
stress how important that is.
Oh, yeah.
Because the growth rate is not at 3%, it's certainly not at 4%.
No.
We're not getting the kind of money because there's not the kind of growth.
Right.
Why is there no growth?
I mean, we're not here to solve that problem right
Well,
now.
it does affect me.
Well,
it
it
affects many
affects
people
us.
that are here.
It affects us, but...
Greatly.
But us sitting around this table are not here to figure out how to get more growth here.
Not today, but yes, we are.
Well...
That is one of our functions, one of our charges.
Well, yeah, I guess in that if we make a, you know, if we take a really meta view of it, and if we
Follow
look
the state
ahead and say, okay, we need to make this nice place, you know, for people moving in 15 years from now so they'll actually want to come, and we got to start doing it now. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a whole other side.
To Brendan's question about labor, so what it appears to me, and keep me on track if this is right, instead of taking a tape measure and measuring all of the non-residential square footage physically present, they took the number of employment types and said there's industrial, commercial, and retail based on our population, how many jobs, and how many jobs are supported, how many square foot it takes to support this kind of job. Is that roughly it? And so that's where they came up with the non-residential square footage that comes with our level of service today. There's X amount of non-residential square footage that supports this many ambulances, this many square feet of, or this, whatever the other elements are.
That's only a percentage of it though.
Well,
So it's like 15% of it, correct?
Right. So then, if population grows, then the assumption is that as that population grows, those people will have jobs in certain sectors that will increase square footage by a certain amount. And then that incremental increase in square footage will create a demand for capital improvements, a la the shed. So it's more complicated than the per door of a residential dwelling, but it's exactly as she described it. It is a rough, it is less granular assumption. So that's your task, but it doesn't make it legally problematic. You're trying to figure out a method that's done by a licensed planner who is using legally permissible assumptions. Whether you buy those assumptions as this board member, but the thing you can't do is just make it up. They're showing their work, and so it makes it legally defensible.
Well, and that's my question, is
Yeah.
how are we getting to this spot? 'Cause I'll just say for the record, I agree, Mitra, you had brought up a statement earlier about we have to get on these things because when you miss out when, you know, growth is going in that, 100% agree with that. I'm just trying to see if we are justifying it with more than a preponderance of, you know, numbers and that, so that, you know, when Alan goes and says, hey, we need this west station, it's like, here you go, here's all the impact fees, it's paid for it. So now we don't have to do a joint, we don't have to go back into the general budget and everything. That's kind of my goal here, is to make sure that if we are trying to make sure to, you know, the impact
So
the best I can give you.
we have collected $326,000 up to this point, right, in total impact fees in unincorporated Elmore County only, to date.
Okay.
That is $326,000 that the taxpayers will not have to pay.
Right.
So every house that gets built and every business that gets built, while we are debating all the details of this, is a lost opportunity for the overall taxpayers of this county. And as we as a collective body make a decision on this, we need to keep that in mind. Every time you go by a construction site, that's a lost opportunity. Because, you know, $326,000 is still $326,000. Is it what we had anticipated? Maybe not, because we haven't agreed with the city of Mountain Home, city of Glens Ferry. And is it 3%? No, it's not 3%. It's 1.1%. So who cares? It's still $326,000 that the taxpayers will not.
So here's the thing, as the mayor walked out, one of the things that he brought up was impact fees that would stop commercial growth. So we haven't even really touched on that tonight. We've really just touched on $438.78. So at what point do we need to start discussing that before we start making decisions? Because I don't want to shut down growth. I don't think anybody in here does. But I also think that we need to figure out a way to collect money to help EMS. In addition to that, at some point in time, we're going to go, hey, we want to do this on the jail, and we want to do these other fees for rural fire and all this stuff. So right now, this one $438.78 impact fee per residential construction doesn't include anything about commercial. So we need to really have a conversation on commercial stuff as well, so we don't shut that down. Because, you know, at some point in time, if you look at, what is it, we had 4,000 and change dollars in the city for, I know there's little fees there, but my Microsoft is
So it's,
But you already have that.
it's right here, but I can't hardly read it.
it's on word. It's 85 cents a square foot for retail, 33 cents a square
But
foot
that's
for
just one fee, right? So when we start looking at this, so as an example, a building permit in the city of Mountain Home will end up being about $6,000 for impact fees only, right? So again, we want to look at this not only just to collect fees, but how do we continue getting growth in this city as well?
Where are they gonna go? Where are they gonna go?
That's
Boise
what-
has impact fees, everybody else has impact fees, so if they don't wanna build here, you don't pay the impact fees, they're gonna face some other city or someplace else.
No, and I'm not saying we shouldn't collect these. I'm trying to figure out at what point do we look at this as commercial side of it.
Yeah, no.
So this is where your role as a builder, developer is as well. So what's been calculated here for EMS.
I thought it was per 100 square feet.
No,
I thought it's per square foot?
Yeah, so
On the sheet the county gave.
Yeah, that's what, so I didn't know that until just now. So 85 cents a square foot. So
$8 a foot.
what's that?
So is that 850 per thousand?
No, 85 cents per square foot for retail for EMS, just the EMS fee,
Yeah.
because that's all we're talking about.
That's it.
Per square foot.
Yeah, the city added that.
85 cents a square foot for EMS.
For EMS only.
Yes, for retail.
But
So
I think we're gonna be looking at this in a much bigger,
but
That's kind of
But what they are
expensive.
saying, Phil, is right now what Jeff and Abby are saying is let's focus on that
I mean,
0.85
think
cents.
of
is this
that
EMS
85
fee?
cents.
The question that the governing bodies have for you, which is why we're here tonight, is $438.70 per single family dwelling, 85 cents per square foot for retail, the 33 cents per square foot for office, 15 cents for industrial, 32 cents for institution. Are those fees, the methodology that's used in the
Oh.
CIP, something that the governing body should adopt and charge the residents? So in your role as a builder, do you think that an 85 cent per square foot fee is going to break your building, if you're building an office or a retail one, or $438 per door for residential?
thousand
big
square
deal.
foot
For a home.
retail space,
You build commercial, I don't.
$850.
So is 85 cents a square foot something that you would say, holy crap, we're not gonna be able to make this work? At, you know,
Well,
a
it's
dollar
not
square
just
foot.
85 cents.
Right.
You're
We're talking
you're
one
talking
aspect today.
one aspect.
Yep, EMS.
Correct.
Yep.
On the county's perspective, we're really not even, we've already adopted this stuff,
Yeah.
whether or not, okay? The city, Glens Ferry, you've got to determine. In a nutshell, the city side of it, and I'm gonna throw jail in there, because eventually it's gonna get there, and the EMS, it's adding about $2,000 on a house.
In the city of Mountain Home.
In the city of Mount Hope.
In city.
In the county, it is,
So you're gonna go from 15,000 to 17,000, give or take. Glens Ferry, I'm not privy to what your numbers are, so I think you're just starting, so
yeah.
I'm assuming you're
really
running
have it
along
yet.
those same types of numbers. So,
But for the city, if you look at the impact fee per house, it's $6,000, because we're already charging 4, and now we're gonna add 2 more to it. So on a 2,000 square foot house, it's $3 a square foot. So when you get to the commercial side, which we really haven't even discussed tonight, that's my next concern. It's not that I don't want to look at doing this, because I think this is something that we really should consider. But my concern is we're making a decision based on a residential project, and we're gonna assume and automatically it's gonna go straight into commercial. And I'm not a commercial guy. So someone like you guys who do commercial work in Pine and the area, that's something you guys need to look at.
There's 4 different categories of commercial: retail, office, industrial, institutional. And so,
But we're trying to make a decision on 438, but nobody's bringing up the
no, you're making a
black
decision.
sheep on the rest of it.
No, you are. You are deciding this.
And
No,
I
that's what I'm
think it's
saying.
good
Nobody's
to-
talking about it.
It's good to note that you're deciding it now. The hope is that this is continuously being revisited and looked at. What are we seeing with the data? What are we seeing with the numbers? Do we need to make adjustments to the CIP? I think what we really need to focus on is stopping the hemorrhaging of the funding for EMS.
Agreed.
And so I think everyone is on board with continuously looking at this. But this is the legally defensible study that we have now that we can base these
I think
fees
you're missing
on.
my point, though.
No, I think I'm hearing it though.
Okay,
You're
what do
saying
you think
how,
my point is?
your point is how did we get to the commercial number?
No, that's not it at all. My point is we've spent the last 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 40 minutes discussing $438. Nobody's mentioned anything about the rest of it, which we should be talking about. That's my point.
One thing I can bring up on the industrial side of it, first of all, if an industrial business is gonna come in here, that's not gonna make a dime's bit of difference.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I
It
need
is
to
not
hear
gonna-
that from the
it's
guys that
not
are
what
building that stuff.
It's not gonna make a dime's bit of difference what they're gonna do, because they already have their budget before they buy the property.
Okay.
So,
That's what I'm
and-
saying. I'm
and
not a commercial guy, but the 2 commercial guys sitting here haven't said anything about commercial side.
90% of all your commercial property is sold by the square foot.
Okay.
So all those numbers, they know all these numbers before they even come talk to you.
Okay.
Now, this is smaller than industrial and commercial, but when we talked earlier about accessory structures and that they were based off of, non-residential, what number here do you use to calculate that fee?
So let's say we're doing, I'm trying to think of the one that we're gonna do it. Let's say it's a shed.
That is plenty in Elmore County. Everybody wants to do
Everybody
shed,
wants
but
a
then
shed.
they live in it, they do so many different things in the shed in Elmore County.
So industrial is what we normally go off our
You use
sheds.
the industrial rate for accessory structures, sheds and garages?
For sheds. Garages do not get impact fees.
Yes, garages do not. But sheds do.
And that's why they have to ask clarifying questions when somebody says, I want to build a shed. What is happening in the shed is the question that Ozzy has really queued up the staff to ask.
On the lawnmower, is it a workshop?
Right.
Man cave.
Yeah, it could be a man cave and that's fine.
Brandon?
Thanks, James.
No problem.
Yeah, I was looking at you, Brendan.
Sorry. No, we're all looking at the chair. Chair Marno. Mountain Home.
So what's next here?
So, again, so you've had a very robust discussion, you've heard everything from Ann and Alan. On the agenda, the next step. So we've done item 4, we only have items 5, 6, 7, and 8 left. So many more, some more pizza.
I thought we were already on 5.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
We just finished 5. We're on 6.
I
Don't take that away from us.
We haven't just,
You're just starting 5. Your discussion decision on written findings and recommendations to your respective governing bodies. In other words, what are your, you can discuss whether you're ready to prepare written findings tonight, whether you want to regroup in your individual committees and prepare those written findings and what they're going to be. That's the step.
let me ask you this. Can we regroup? And I don't mean dragging this shit out for, don't mean dragging this stuff out for weeks on end. I would like to see if we're gonna table this, so to speak, that we do it and we do it within the next week. Because I don't think we want to miss opportunities for projects.
Well, it's fresh in people's minds.
Exactly. I think it's a big ask, again, I'm just speaking for myself, I think it's a big ask for us to make a solid decision on residential and commercial EMS tonight, given we're almost 3 hours into this, and we still haven't really made a decision. I don't know if it's possible for the 2 impact advisory groups to meet, with lawyers in the room and, local community people or whatever. I don't know that we need everybody here to talk about this, but maybe we come together and generate some questions that we can ask Alan and Mitra and James and Johnny about, I don't know if that's something that's palatable or if that's just like, you guys are making a decision.
I will say that in trying to schedule this meeting, we have, it took about 4 months to get this meeting scheduled.
Why is that?
Yeah.
I do not know.
So if this group of people is the one making the decisions here on the next meeting, then I think we can make the decision. If it has to go through the city and the commissioners and the mayor,
No,
I can't help you with that.
it's just the chance of getting all this number of people to all agree that they've all got the same day available. That's the problem.
We just need a quorum.
Yeah, we just
Not
need a
everybody
quorum.
has to agree, we just need a quorum.
But hold on, this next part here, I thought this was sort of what we were supposed to be doing with our group, our own, whatever the organization that we're here with, and we write up our thing and say what we're gonna say about it to our city or our group, that this wasn't all supposed to be one single hive decision.
Yeah,
So
because
why
your impact fee group isn't even here.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, the whole group?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you
I
don't
mean,
have quorum.
we still got
Do you guys have a
several
quorum for
members
Glen's Ferry?
of our community are here.
Exactly, that's my point.
You're missing one for a quorum, but to her point is, you can either, to your point about the ability of getting everybody together, you have the ability to set your next meeting now as a committee. You kind of do, because your attorney's here. So, the lack of a quorum isn't fatal. You have, I think, your
think so, yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
then
We
to
can
the
just
extent,
go in,
yeah, you guys can
meet down there
if you want.
for an hour and talk about it and outline the thing and then I'll write
Unless
it.
you have something else you need to do here, we can avail ourselves of Abby and the county's resources later when you meet, and you can pick
Yeah.
a date that you wanna meet and then render it. So,
Um,
if you have enough information now, you're free to
okay,
go.
okay.
That's all I wanted to hear. Free to go.
I'm sure everybody else can handle this without our comments. Thank you very much. It's been
Thank you.
it's been wonderfully informative.
I'm not prepared for presentation at this time.
Never mind.
Okay, so we have an action item on the agenda.
Consider for a minute,
Action item number 5,
We will, yeah,
discussion
we will
decision
Hold on,
on
Rick.
findings.
I would like to have a quick sidebar with Jeff real quick to ask a question on the legal side of something.
Thank you, Dennis.
If that's okay.
Take a 5-minute recess and record real quick.
Cold got it.
Oh, they
Oh,
called.
got it. 5 minutes, Nicole.
And over at that.
All right, never.
That helps, thank you.
Yep, that's a policy decision.
That was quick. That was quick, Philip.
It was a very
I was
simple,
hunkering
it was
down.
a very
I
simple
don't
question.
expect there's some. I was getting never been
Once
there.
everybody's back, I'll let everybody know what the big secret was.
Inquiring minds want to know. Good questions, by the way.
Apparently, I was sent one of these documents, and I just went through my email while Brenda and I were talking. I cannot find the county CIP in any of my emails, so.
I didn't get it.
Okay, good. I'm looking at it going, I don't have this. I just did a search for it in my email, and I don't
Do you look in your spam?
I did a complete search on everything.
That's normally where you're.
I know, and I even went there because we talked, but I literally can't find it. I've got an email that talks about it, but it doesn't have any attachments on it. So,
I got so many, my secretary never goes through my emails, it's. I've never heard about my work.
there's Twinkies up here. Sure, that's gotta be helping.
Something we can put in real ice.
20-year life expectancy.
Well, I wonder how old they are.
Doesn't matter, they last forever.
Well, Alan, there's plenty in that bowl.
You can have a Twinkie for 20 years.
You'll look like a Twinkie.
That goes in your survival gear. Man, I think I can eat this thing moldy.
The trouble is I've eaten too bad, we can over the last 20 years.
So we used to always carry around Canadian sausages in the backpack.
I know guys that carry sardines. I just couldn't do it.
Carry what?
I carried can of sardines
Oh.
in their pack. I'm just like, what is wrong?
The fire guys like those little fish sausages.
That's what he was just saying.
Grandpa used to always have a can of it in the backpack, and every time we went hunting and everything.
I've seen, in the last week, I bet I've seen 10 ads for Spam.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
It's making a comeback.
I think it is.
Doesn't last forever. It's like Twinkies.
Just the attorneys.
says it's snowing outside.
Is
Throw
it?
that watch away.
What?
Don't say that.
Still here.
I'm still on
Watch
call.
says it, it must be true.
I'm still on call.
Gonna go look.
Just saying chance.
It's up in the hills.
It's like statistics.
Their suggestions.
You just made this up. It was a really good job.
There are very few rules.
Thank you very much.
So I have a friend who has one of those alkaline kits. Yeah, it's Canyon. It's actually she's like 5 feet. She was going through a lot of cancer
Yeah,
problems.
Bone says it too.
And she did a bunch of research. She's still
Mountain Home Arkansas, maybe.
You'd be surprised how many times I put Mountain Home weather in and it goes
I very deliberately
So I'm
write
turning
that.
back on the mics because recess is over, just to give everybody a heads up.
No F-bombs?
Drop the gavel.
Alright, so is everybody back to be from our side?
Huh?
Yes.
Yes.
So basically,
Please, reflect, we're back on the record at 8:55.
so the question I asked was, can we make, is it possible to make a decision based on just the residential side and not include the fees for commercial at this time? So the answer is, that is something we could potentially do if this group wants to do that. So again, I'm not wanting to miss opportunities, right? I think we have a lot more residential stuff going on than we do commercial anyways. So that's an option if the group chooses to look at maybe just doing that part of it. Did I say that right? Were you gonna listen to me, Jeff?
Well, I have a police issue
Uh-oh.
that's coming up.
Yeah, that's probably more important.
So you can't just do residential and not non-residential.
Well, that's what I asked.
No,
You said we can make that
No.
recommendation.
no, let me back up.
Okay.
You're making a recommendation. I'm skipping ahead to the implementation.
Got it.
So in other words, the governing body isn't looking for half of a recommendation. The governing body is looking for a whole recommendation on the implementation of the EMS portion of the capital improvement plan. Adopting the whole thing. So the recommendation is partial, that is, we feel that the per door residential fee is fine, but we think that the non-residential needs more work, then that's what your recommendation is. Your recommendation's up to you. Write it how you wish. But know this, that we're not allowed to only assess impact fees on residential dwellings and not on commercial. That's not allowed. The rest of it's up to you.
Any more discussion on item number 5?
Well, I'll say that I'm not convinced. I've been concerned from the beginning when we started discussing impact fees. I'm not compelled by the information provided. We were promised, well, not promised, it's a strong term. We were assured that fees would not be a deterrent for development. It's Development 101. Of course it is. If you're going to charge somebody money, you're going to charge them taxes and fees. They want to know how much they're going to be paying. And it is, while being true that really every municipality across the country charges fees of one form or another, maybe an impact fee. Back east they call them proffers. Sometimes they're astronomical, like New England, for instance. Sometimes they're very minimal, which includes here in the state of Idaho. And it needs to be based on as accurate information as one has. We do have hindsight now, based on where we didn't have it to the extent, or to this extent, when we first started these discussions. I think that from my position, I would like to reassess the CIPs based on numbers that are more accurate to what our actual growth and growth projections are. I do know, although not a builder, architect and developer, the fees matter, and if they aren't carefully considered, you will drive away development. I know that to be a fact here in this very city and in the county. I know it for a fact because I talk to large commercial and industrial companies that are interested in looking at mountain home. And oftentimes they don't want to pay fees because they're going to be a long-term tax base. So for that reason, I would like for our committee to discuss it a little more further, a little more carefully. And I would like to see from the county CIP perhaps numbers that reflect, I would even go up to a 2% growth rate, which we're not at and haven't been throughout the duration, and find out where that lands us. And at that time, I think it's very much a valid ask.
Mr. Chair, could I clarify something? If the study were to be redone in that way, which would require it to be started over again, and the growth was cut to whatever percent is cut, the amount of capital would be cut, and the corresponding amount, the fee would be exactly the same. The math, the numerator and the denominator would just change at the same rate. So it could happen if, if the county and the city and whomever wanted to pay to do the study all over again, it will not change the fee.
Because it's tied to the residential unit or vehicle trip generated from the commercial.
Every unit of growth has a relationship to the amount of capital. By reducing the growth, you have to reduce the
Well, if I can interject really quickly, it's tied, growth rate is tied, so Title 67, Chapter 82 is very clear. It is tied to growth rate. Growth rate necessitates a time frame for a facility or an apparatus, some type of equipment. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense that the fees would be the same if we essentially have no growth rate that would require no expenditure.
Right, if you have no growth and no expenditures, I don't know why you're still here.
Correct.
So you could probably just vote no and not go and not have to ever pay for anything again.
Right. So we're not
just
really
pay
growing.
as a
And I think
taxpayer.
that we're not growing as a consequence. Well, it's not the taxpayer. Taxpayer, I mean, something was said twice, actually it was 3 times, that concerns me. And that is we have an existing deficiency in the EMS. We're already hemorrhaging, we hear hemorrhaging money in the EMS. I think that we need to address that. And trying to cook the books, so to speak, justify that, seems to me a gross error. So that was brought up at the very beginning, and it fell on deaf ears, both at the city and the county. And so when asked for information, instead of being provided that information, or I would say I got essentially a post-it note, and lots of sneers. Well, I think the facts matter. The facts at hand matter. As angry as that may make people, the facts are the facts. And so I do believe that growth ought to pay for itself. I don't quite understand, even with methodology, does it make sense? I mean, from the county side, to give a little feedback and a little bit more information. We sat around. I thought the meetings were productive. The lion's share of us were not in agreement with the findings. It was not unanimous. We didn't agree. And when we brought up questions, the response was, well, you go sit in front of Alan and justify to him what you want to cut out of his CIP. So in other words, I'm going to pit somebody in our community against another member of our community. I don't like that. I think that's strong-arming. it's strong arming. So rather than address the concern was avoided. So now is our opportunity as joint committees that we're going to agree to something. I could very well be wrong. Maybe growth will occur if we tack on $18,000, $20,000 in fees, not including a building permit, by the way. I find that untenable. And housing's already expensive. Commercial construction and construction in general is expensive. It's expensive because we lack labor. I'm in a lot of these meetings, so I do know. And I would like those to be addressed, certainly before I make a decision or put my weight behind it. Because I've sat in meetings as well between the city and the county where they evoke the name of of our committees, saying that we all agreed with the fees. The hell we did. It has to be based on actual information. So with that, I've completed my soapbox speech.
Any more discussion on item number 5? Yeah. Any motion? Or
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for our committee on the city side that we convene again amongst our body to discuss the possible effects, the CIP in more detail amongst our body, and what it entails. I would say, I propose a week from, what's today, Thursday? A week from today.
13.
I'll second that.
hold on. So there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes. So you mentioned some information that you're looking for. I don't know if you were referring to the city side or the county side, because you happen to be in both positions. But would it be possible to get a list of the items that you would look to that would help you make a decision? Can we get that from either the city or the county before this meeting? Is that something that, again, I don't know what exactly you're looking for, so I'm just asking, is that something we could get? If we can get a list from you so that it would help everybody make a decision?
Absolutely.
Mitra, is that something we could do? Jeff or Abby?
I don't know what the request is. I think the information is, the documents are adopted. It's in, we followed every procedure, legal proceedings. So Taran is correct, there were a lot of discussions. All of those were documented of what was discussed at the Elmore County's Impact Fee Advisory Committee. All of those were documented, presented to the Board of County Commissioners, and then they made the decision that they needed to make. So he is correct, there were a lot of discussions on that. Having said that, the fees are adopted by Elmore County. So, I mean, I don't know what more we can provide besides, here is what we have collected, here is what the growth numbers are. I don't know what else we could provide, because we are talking about two different ideological discussion here. We are saying that it's tied to the growth unit, and he's saying growth is not going to occur. Well, if we want to all adopt that mentality that growth is not going to occur, then why are we talking about impact fees? Let's just all go home and pay out of our taxpayer.
My question would be for Taryn is what additional information do you want to see, Taryn? Because what I've heard is you just want the CIP to be redone. And I'm not sure, I mean, if we have the same consultants do the CIP, they're going to use the same methodology, same data. So what is it that we're testing?
Great question. So it would be twofold. So I don't quite understand how the CIP can yield the same numbers. The things that don't change or wouldn't change, so growth rate would change. The time frame, so instead of a 10-year window, I believe the state statute says you need to plan for 10 years. I don't think we're going to see the kind of growth that
But articulate for me again what it is that you want to see.
So I would like to see a revision of the CIP.
So you want and that was what I...
Correct.
Okay.
Based on, so as part of, which I didn't know at the time, I should have mentioned it during our initial discussions, is that our body was supposed to be privy to the creation of the CIP. And so in other words, it's not supposed to happen behind the scenes. It's supposed to be in conjunction with our committees, so we can provide
City of Mountain Home to these meetings, starting with the very first meeting in September of 2021. I'm sorry the city did not participate in those processes. That is not on us. We have been in front of your city council 3 times requesting this information.
I think it's just helpful to have the clarity that it's not that you are seeking additional information, it's that you want the CIP revised and redone. Which obviously is at least a year-long process. So I think what I'm hearing is the Mountain Home Committee is not going to adopt the EMS fees until there's a revised CIP, which I think honestly it's discouraging, but it's information that we'll certainly take back to the court.
Well, hold on a second. So legally, the city has to adopt a CIP. They have to adopt a capital improvement plan. That supports the fee. You can adopt this thing as it's written, that the county did, or you can adopt some modified version of it, provided it delivers on the same basis and the same, uses some similar rationale. So your beef is with the rationale at which they arrive at the numbers, is that correct? Or you just don't understand it? It appears to me that, it appears.
I get it.
Well, it appears that you understand the issue that growth not occurring in that time frame, changing the time frame, changing the growth projections doesn't alter the fee. So that's fine. If what you think this Impact Fee Advisory Committee needs to do is take this CIP and call it the Mountain Home City EMS calculated CIP to calculate impact fees for the county, it really mangled that. But anyway, that's a recommendation you can make. So that's on your menu of recommendations you can make. What the county is asking you is if there's any more information that they can provide to you and how these fees were calculated that might make it so that you can adopt them as they are. That's what she's asking you.
Gotcha.
In other words, if you throw in some different numbers in terms of growth rates, can they compute back out to you? Can they show you, can we have live Excel spreadsheets on this document so that you can monkey with it and see if you're willing to come up? Is that what you're looking for?
No.
No?
To make sure that I understand what you're asking me, and I'll preface my question back to you with, I concur. So I know Alan pretty well, and believe he's a very stand-up and honest man. So the questions I have for him would be further discussion about timeframes, because again, unfortunately I heard what I heard, and that is there are existing deficiencies. You can't pay for existing deficiencies with impact fees. So the existing deficiency would be, because I don't like when people throw taxes around either. The community's going to pay more taxes. Well, you don't grow, and you have ailing infrastructure, and you're already failing, then sure, your taxes are going to have to go up. So what I'd like to better...
Real quick on that. They never said anything that we were failing. Said we're not collecting enough money to be able to grow anything. So we could go along right now today. You said absolutely nothing. We go on status quo just like we are, and you get the exact same service that we are, moving straight forward. We just have nothing coming in or able to come in to do anything more for anybody. So as we do grow, whether it's 1% or 100%, we're not able to go out based on those dollars that we currently bring in to do anything to do with expanding the service to provide the same or better service to our patrons.
Yep, understood.
If I just clarify that part of it. So
yep.
Thank you.
So the direct quote would be, we need to stop the hemorrhaging of EMS in the county.
And that was my quote.
Correct.
And my point in that is that based on the fees that are being collected for EMS services, there's no ability to have a reserve fund that will then fund capital improvement projects. Right now, it's barely covering the cost of services. There's no ability, I mean, you brought up the example of wastewater, right? Where typically you would have an an ability to fund your O&M and then your CIP from that. In this situation, with what they're receiving from insurance, what they're receiving from their general fund is barely covering the services. There's not an ability to put extra money into a reserve for CIP.
So, may I ask a question? So kind of what I'm hearing is, county commissioners adopted this against the recommendations of the county impact advisory board. Is that what I'm understanding? Because that's kind of what I hear, but I don't, so I'm trying to figure out if that
It wouldn't be
is.
the first time.
So, so can I get an honest, like, who do we find that out for? Because I guess that would make.
So there is,
We voted for it.
Yeah.
It was passed. You were there.
Excuse me? No, I didn't hear you.
I said, we voted for it. It was passed. You were there.
I did not vote for it.
Well, you were there and voted.
right, whether you voted for it or not is a different, and it's documented in a document that was presented to the Board of County Commissioners, so it's a public
No,
information.
let me grab some clarity here. As a committee, we never voted. All right, there were opinions given, there was recommendations given, but we never voted as a committee. So if that's what the arguable point here is, the fact is, there was not a vote taken by our committee.
Is there the recommendation, was it voted on? No.
So again.
Well, that, I don't know that that's here or there, because that, they use their process. The process the
Correct.
city of Mountain Home is going to follow is this, because your legal advisor is telling you the process that you're gonna follow. This is what you're gonna do. And again, you have my unbounded thanks for volunteering to do this. Your review the capital improvement plan and proposed amendments and file written comments. Now, whether those written comments come as a collective one that you vote on, or you file written comments and you file written comments and you file written comments, that's up to you guys. You can do that as a committee however you want. So, Taryn can write a written comment to the City of Mountain Home's City Council. Ray can. You, as the chairman of the committee, can say, we're gonna stay here all night until we bang out on this typewriter one coherent written report. But that's, you're gonna render a report. This is the bottom line. The governing body is the one that adopts the CIP. The governing body holds a public hearing on whether to adopt the CIP. But they need your written report. And to the extent there's disagreement among the committee, then they get that disagreement in the written report. Which I suspect is what happened at the county. So to say that it was never voted on or never approved isn't really in the statutory framework. You're to file written comments. And then, again, monitor and evaluate, file reports annually, advise the entity of the need to update or revise the land use assumption, and so on. So, anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. But
Thank you for the clarification, Jeff. I think that the actual question would be, of the members of the county DIFAC, how many were largely in agreement, partially in agreement, wanted to see additional information? Is that correct, Phyllis?
So, again, I look at these two groups as advisors to the much bigger group, right? That's kind of what we're here for. I think that if, let's just, again, I don't know the numbers. You have, what, 5 people on your group? 6. So if it was a 50-50 split, it goes to the commissioners, and the commissioners go, we either like it or we don't. Obviously, they said we like it. If it was, a 60-40 split against, and then the county said, don't care, have a good day, I guess that's up to them, but I think that's a poor use of your advisory committees. So, if that was kind of the scenario that drove you guys to a decision, I don't know that we could make a difference on that, right? I mean, there's really no way to make a difference on that. The decision was made. myself as a partner to this group of people up here. And so to do my due diligence, it's warranted that I spend a little more time on this. I don't want this to drag out because this is all going to be very fresh in my head at 5 o'clock in the morning when I'm driving back to Garden Valley or wherever, right? But it does bother me that if you guys have asked this group of people to stand before you and make advisory decisions or recommendations, and then the commissioners go, nah, screw it, we don't care, that's not necessarily good. Much the same as it would be on us if we said yes or no and then go the opposite way. I mean, that stuff happens. We've done it with PNC, and so at the end of the day, we need to make a solid decision moving forward. I am not prepared to make a decision tonight. I think I need to do a little more research and maybe ask some questions. And I don't want to get into an open meeting violation like you've already hit me with once, just so we're clear. So I'm going to be asking you some questions during the next few days, but I think a week is plenty of time to go through this and make a decision. You know, if you, Tara, need some information, maybe it would help this group to get some of that information. If the county could provide it or the attorneys could provide it on behalf of the county, however you guys want to do it, I think at some point in time we're going to have to sit down and go, okay, personally, if I'm in an accident or I'm having a heart attack or a stroke, I want that guy and his team to come take care of me in short order. I don't think that the community as a whole should pay more taxes to do that. I think that growth should pay for growth. And you're talking to a guy that's going to be writing checks for this shit stuff. Excuse me, my bad. But at the end of the day, again, I'm not prepared tonight to make that decision. I didn't come here tonight with the understanding that we were going to make this decision, just so we're clear. I was under the impression that we were getting information to review and compile and ask our questions for a future date to make the decision. That's what I was told, that's what I understood, and so that's the route I would like to go. So if there's documents that you need, Taryn, to make these decisions, if it's something the county can provide, or the city or whoever, I would recommend that that body does so in short order so we can move on and get these guys some money if that's what we got to do. There you go. That's my 2 cents.
I'm in agreement myself. I'm not prepared to make a decision.
I only threw the action item on there so that you could if you wanted to.
Okay.
That's a strategic thing, but guess who's not writing the next agenda? Guess who is?
So I'll say for the record, 100% growth should pay for itself in that, and I'm open to that. I do have some questions on the CIP and that. Alan, I want to ask if you're open to coming back, you know, if it's a week and we discuss these CIP items and everything and showing all of these pieces and that and some of the other information that's being requested on that. You know, I think you've been great on the information brought, like 3,000 calls, you know, 67% of it's in there. I know there was discussed about, you know, the budget, how you're collecting on insurance and everything. That's something I would be interested to see, you know, how much is it residential? You know, we live right by the interstate. I'm kind of like, how much of it is, you know, residents that are in there? Is that taken into the account of the calculation? Like, I understand, and I'm not a professional when it comes to making these CIPs and everything like that, so, and I will never say I'm an expert. I just want to see what the numbers look like and how that all calculates out. Because, again, as a recommending body, I just don't feel comfortable going, okay, yes, if the growth rate is different, or we need these items and everything, and we haven't had that discussion, to me, that's kind of, well, I'm not doing my due diligence and saying, no, this is what we truly believe, this is what we're going to send off as a recommendation, and we're all on the same page. That, for me, is what I would like a body to look at the CIP, and if you're open to it, discussing, going, yes, we need these things, and showing us. Because if you can show it, and we can do the numbers and play around with spreadsheets and everything, I'm all on board. Like I said growth should pay for itself, and I stand by that. But I want to make sure that we are justified, because I don't want it coming back on us legally somehow. And that's kind of what I've been trying to ask, is there some way that that can come back on us as a city?
I asked that right out of the
state for the record that I am 100% open discussing this more. I don't want you to feel that we're wasting your time, or we're just dragging this on and that. That's why I think it's important we come back. There's a motion made to come back in another week with some questions on that. So I guess before we take a vote, I just want to ask Alan and the county if you guys are willing to come back again and talk, so we're not, trying to jam this all into one night, and then a week or two goes by and I'm like, oh, we didn't even think of that.
I'm more than willing. I am out of town the 13th through the 18th. So I have a committed trip. I'm leaving Thursday morning and I won't be back till Tuesday.
The next Thursday after that is the 20th.
Or about the 12th. Does that give us enough time?
I can't be on the phone.
Our body as a whole has determined that Thursdays works best for the majority.
Just keep that up.
Yeah.
Not that we can't have a special date, but
Any other suggestion? 20th?
20th.
we do have a P and Z meeting that night.
Can't do it on the 20th.
Correct. We do have a budget meeting.
Following week, we have the PNCs.
How about the 14th?
Alan's out. Right out? 13th through the 18th.
I leave
And you're gonna piss some people off. That's Valentine's Day.
Ninth?
I make up for it on Saturday.
Make the 19th.
You good on the 19th? Well,
I can do the 19th.
Unfortunately,
I cannot do the 19th.
I will make some adjustments on that.
Well,
I have
Do you
a
have more questions for
PCRCC
Alan?
meeting.
I don't think we need to,
the county.
we don't need you guys.
Yeah, right.
Just be the city and
Just be the
Mitra
Mitra,
and Alan.
Alan.
Would the 19th work for you, Alan?
19th?
Now barring flight problems, right?
Yeah, I fly back the 18th, but, this date
So
ain't.
depending on where you're coming from, we may have to slip it again if you're potentially.
I will-
Maybe not.
I will keep you posted though, if something changes.
For the 19th?
Yeah, I plan on being back the 18th for this time, so.
So then, for the record, so there's 19th, can we get on the record for what documents on that? I think one of mine is the calculations, just seeing the differences on those growth rates on that, I think would be just good for me. Is there anything else? I know Taryn had a couple items on that.
I got an issue with that. Tischler Bice did those numbers when I was working for them. I don't work for them anymore. I don't have their computer, so I don't have access to the database any longer.
Do you have what's in the report? That's all we have access to. No one has a contract anymore because it's
Yeah,
been so long.
we're all here helping.
Yeah, so they are here as my county economist today, not as impact fee consultants.
Gotcha.
What you might, someone who's better whiz at it than I am, because I tried this, I was talking to Tara, to Abby about, I tried to convert some of this document into Excel, and, I started to become violent.
I can't tell you if growth is calculated in the model at 3% and we're looking at 1.5%, the capital improvement plan would have to be cut in half. It's that simple. The math is that simple. It's all based on proportionality, which is the law. It has to be based on proportionality. So if growth drops by half and is estimated at half of what it's supposed to be, the capital plan would just have to be cut in half.
And the fees are the same.
And the fee would stay the same.
Changing
Right.
the growth.
That's what Ann was trying to explain. But what we talked about with capital, the defect for the county is we're 1 year into this and months. We don't know, we don't have enough history in 1 year and months to really recognize whether we're above, below, or whatever, and we haven't been collecting 100% everywhere. So we really have bad data. If you were to enact as is with whatever it is, the growth rate that's proposed and everything else with the capital plan as is, you would have year after year then to do the math and recalculate the capital plan with Alan's, and I apologize, I don't know who told you that, Taryn, that you had to do a one-on-one with Alan, because that was not appropriate. What was probably meant was Alan would need to come to the DFAC to talk about how to reduce the capital plan. It would be the entire county DFAC and now the county and city because that's what your process is here, is to recognize a change in the growth, would have to result in a change of the capital plan.
Hopefully that's not what was understood, but what you just said, that the latter of what you said is what I meant.
Okay, all right. I thought they told you to go sit down with Alan, and okay, that would have been inappropriate.
No.
We'll go meet in the alley later.
I like to fight.
So that's what I was trying to, it's a lot simpler. It's crazy because of all the numbers and all the insanity that's going on. But because of the rule of proportionality, that's what's going to happen. The fee would stay the same. Growth rate goes down by half. The capital plan goes down by half. So some of those items on there, Ellen would have to say, gone. And then the committee would have to say, we agree. Those are gone. And everybody's on the same page, and you move forward.
Perfect, thank you for the clarification. So, with that being said, that's kind of for me personally, not speaking for everyone, how I'd like to go forward, because just for the record, there's pieces of our own city CIP that I think we have to be looking at, because that's just something that we're learning as a committee that, we need to be looking at and everything like that. So, I'm not going to take on the county and not practice the same principles that I think that our committee should be doing with city CIP and that. So, with that being said, I hope that that's open to that.
So before we get to a decision, James, would it be possible to have a few examples of I don't know, the shed, drawn up with like a 600 square foot shed, 20,000 square foot building for commercial purposes? Give me a couple of examples of things that you guys have been asked about. I'm sure people have come and talked to you and said, hey, we're looking at doing this, what's this, If you could give that kind of stuff to us, sometime before the 19th, give us a couple of days ahead of time. I think putting that kind of data in front of this group may help us understand a little bit better what kind of fees we're really talking about. Is that fair request? Easy. Cool. Okay.
Okay. So there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Call the question.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. I vote aye as well.
What's your meeting time, 6 o'clock?
6
Yes,
o'clock.
please. Yes, please.
6 o'clock for the 19th. Okay, I'll be cognizant of everyone's time and over.
I got it now. I'm good with this. I just want to.
So we still have a few items for us. Maybe wait for everyone.
You're fine.
I need a second.
Second.
No?
Yeah, so.
Vote?
Aye.
Still there? We voted. Done.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Ellen. Appreciate it.
All right.
That's what I was thinking.
Thank you for keeping it warm. I've been practicing making my face. I'm not good.
Wait till you get 20 feet away.
Wait till it's off.
Good job.
Okay. So item number 6, any other miscellaneous business, general discussion for our committee?
Wait to have a discussion until people clear out.
Can we take a break then? Let's take a quick break and let everybody get out.
For the record, like we took a 5-minute break.
It's like a 3-minute
9:30.
Okay.